T-minus 10, 9, 8,
The clock is
7.
operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here. Endeavor, go at run left.
Aboard the Soyuz at this hour, our Expedition 15 Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin, a 48-year-old engineer and test pilot for the RSC Energia Corporation. Expedition 15 Soyuz Commander and Flight Engineer Oleg Kotov, a 41-year-old Russian Air Force colonel and medical doctor, and American spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi, the 58-year-old former executive and software developer for the Microsoft Corporation, flying under a commercial agreement with the Russian Federal Space Agency. All three are making their first flight on a Soyuz rocket. Yurchikhin is the only space veteran, having launched on the shuttle Atlantis in 2002 on the STS-112 mission. You are seeing some video that was provided from Baikonur earlier today. This were scenes of a crew news conference that took place yesterday. This crew news conference, traditional at the Cosmonaut Hotel outside the front gates of the Cosmodrome itself in the town of Baikonur, as Simonyi on your left, Oleg Kotov in the center, and Fyodor Yurchikhin on the right answered questions from reporters. And again, the traditional L-1 crew news conference that took place behind a glass partition to maintain medical quarantine for the crew.
Вопрос ко всем. Что вы сделаете первым делом, когда вернетесь на Землю?
Ну, безусловно, первым, что хотелось...
Once they are launched, Kotov as Soyuz commander and Yurchikhin as the onboard Soyuz flight engineer will oversee several orbital correction maneuvers using thrusters on the spacecraft to adjust the altitude and trajectory relative to the International Space Station as it begins the chase to rendezvous and dock to the complex on Monday. Once the Soyuz reaches orbit and its solar arrays are deployed and its navigation antennas, there will be two engine firings later today by Kotov at 4:06 p.m. Central Time and again at 4:55 p.m. Central Time to raise the altitude and then circularize the Soyuz's orbit as it refines its path toward the International Space Station. The crew will go to sleep in orbit at 8 p.m. Central Time tonight, a 10-hour, 45-minute sleep period, waking up on Sunday at 6:45 a.m. Central Time. Again, the docking of the Soyuz TMA-10 spacecraft and the new crew for the International Space Station is scheduled on Monday at 2:12 p.m. Central Time, 11:12 p.m. Moscow time, as the Soyuz and the station fly high over the Ukraine, southeast of the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. Right now, the International Space Station and the Expedition 14 crew of Commander Mike Lopez Alegria, Flight Engineer Mikhail Turin, and Flight Engineer Sonny Williams are flying over the southern Atlantic Ocean, beginning a southwest to northeasterly trek that will soon carry it across the west coast of Africa and the equator to begin another orbit of the Earth. Down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, once again, the launch vehicle control system has been prepared for the liftoff of the Soyuz TMA-10, which is about 58 minutes from now. The gyroscopes on the Soyuz TMA-10 also have been activated. About 20 minutes from now, the launch pad service structure, the launch tower, if you will, that provided access for launch pad engineers to the Soyuz TMA-10 will be rolled back, exposing the Soyuz TMA-10. At that point, it is supported on the launch pad by two umbilical towers that maintain electrical connections and replenish fuel to the spacecraft during the final hour of the countdown. You're looking at the configuration of the Soyuz. As you can see it here, the Soyuz vehicle basically comprises of three different stages. The first stage of the Soyuz rocket has 4 liquid fuel engines strapped to the side of the core vehicle. Each will burn for approximately 1 minute 58 seconds. The core engine also serves as the second stage engine and will continue to burn until about the 4-minute 58-second point of the Soyuz's climb to orbit. The third stage has a single engine that will burn for about 4 minutes 2 seconds, shutting down at the 9-minute mark of the flight. At that point, the Soyuz will be in an initial orbit of about 143 statute miles at its apogee, 118 miles at its perigee. That equates to about 230 by 189 kilometers. Inside the Soyuz TMA-10 capsule itself, Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin is strapped into the left seat as the onboard engineer. Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov is in the center seat, and U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi is in the right seat. The 23.5-foot-long Soyuz spacecraft weighs about 15,800 pounds, composed of 3 modules. At the top, the orbital module, and is the descent module in which the crew resides for launch and landing, the only one of the 3 modules that returns to Earth. Once the Soyuz reaches orbit later tonight, its solar array wings will be deployed, spanning about 35 feet. The entire spacecraft is nestled inside a protective shroud at the top of the rocket. The shroud will be jettisoned about 3 minutes after launch. The crew uses the orbital module, sometimes known as the habitation module. Again, that it includes the docking mechanism, the hatch that ultimately will lead the crew inside the International Space Station, and the rendezvous and navigation antennas. This portion of the Soyuz separates from the remaining compartments after the deorbit burn has been completed near the end of the spacecraft's mission. The descent module, again, that would be the middle compartment of the Soyuz, contains personally contoured couches for the crew members during launch, re-entry, and landing. This module contains all of the controls and the displays necessary for critical flight activities. It also contains life support provisions, batteries for re-entry and landing, and the parachutes and landing engines that fire just prior to touchdown to soften the Soyuz's touchdown on the steppes of Kazakhstan. The lower portion of the Soyuz, known as the instrumentation and propulsion module, houses the oxygen storage tanks, the attitude control thrusters, and the communications and control equipment. It also contains all of the avionics equipment used for primary guidance, navigation and control, as well as computer systems for the entire spacecraft. The propulsion portion of this module handles orbital maneuvers, such as the 2 engine firings that will take place later today once the Soyuz reaches orbit, those rendezvous maneuvers to reach the International Space Station, as well as the engines for the deorbit burn at the end of the spacecraft's mission. The 2 solar arrays that are folded against the body of the instrumentation and propulsion module, which again separates from the descent module after the deorbit burn, those solar arrays will be deployed just moments after the Soyuz reaches its preliminary orbit following 3rd stage separation today. Those solar arrays, of course, acquire sunlight converted into electricity to power all of the Soyuz systems until it is docked and receives electricity from the International Space Station systems, the electrical systems on the station itself. This Soyuz TMA-10 capsule serves not only as a crew transport vehicle to and from the station, but also remains docked at the station in the unlikely event the crew would have to leave the station unexpectedly. About 30 minutes ago, an onboard timing device was initiated to control the final major events leading up to the liftoff. Tonight, on a chilly night in the Central Asian desert in Kazakhstan, as we said before, 2 cosmonauts and an American businessman set to begin the journey to the International Space Station to continue the uninterrupted human presence in space. Expedition 15 Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin, flight engineer and Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov, and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi arrived in Baikonur 11 days ago for final pre-launch preparations and traditional ceremonial activities. After spending almost 2 weeks in which they checked out their Soyuz TMA-10 spacecraft and their flight equipment, and to brush up on training, the crew is strapped in aboard the Soyuz spacecraft, bolted at the top of a Soyuz booster, fully fueled and ready for launch. Kotov, the Soyuz commander, seated in the middle seat of the Soyuz, with Yurchikhin as the ascent flight engineer seated in the left seat, Simonyi seated in the right seat of the Soyuz vehicle, ready to begin his flight, which will span 13 days under a commercial agreement with the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos. After launch, the Soyuz capsule's climb to orbit will be monitored through a series of tracking stations stretching from Baikonur all the way east of Vladivostok, located about 100 kilometers east of the Chinese border. Search and recovery forces in Baikonur have been deployed downrange in the unlikely event of a contingency that includes 8 airplanes, 22 Mi-8 helicopters, and one recovery ship in the Sea of Japan. Since arriving in Baikonur, the Expedition 15 crew and Simonyi have been brushing up on their flight plan, exercising and relaxing in the final days prior to the start of the mission. A small NASA delegation is represented tonight in Baikonur by Phil Cleary, the Director of Human Spaceflight Programs in Russia, the Russian Federal Space Agency, represented by its head, Anatoly Permanov. The enormous launch complex in Baikonur lies to the north of the railway junction town of Tyuratam, east of the Aral Sea. Work on that cosmodrome began almost a half-century ago. In 1955, when the former Soviet military required that test facilities be constructed to accommodate ballistic missile testing well away from U.S. Air Force surveillance posts in Turkey. Today, years later, with hundreds of launches in the history books, the stage is set for another one to continue the permanent human occupancy of the International Space Station. The weather tonight in Baikonur is mostly overcast. There have been some rain showers and some drizzle reported. Temperatures in the high 30s for the launch tonight of the Expedition 15 crew, Yurchikhin and Kotov, and their spaceflight participant passenger, American businessman Charles Simonyi. As we mentioned a moment or two ago, once they are launched, Kotov as Soyuz commander and Yurchikhin as the onboard Soyuz flight engineer will oversee several orbital correction maneuvers using thrusters on the Soyuz to adjust the altitude and trajectory relative to the International Space Station as it begins the chase to rendezvous and dock to the complex on Monday. Again, the docking scheduled on Monday at 2:12 p.m. Central Time, 11:12 p.m. Moscow time, as the Soyuz and the station fly over the Ukraine, southeast of the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. The Soyuz will link up directly to the station's Zarya module to the Earth-facing port of Zarya. That is the first component of the complex that was launched back on November 20th, 1998. The port was cleared for docking by the Expedition 14 crew, which relocated its Soyuz, that's the TMA-9 spacecraft, on March 29th, from Zarya to the aft port of the Zvezda service module, where it currently resides and will until the Expedition 14 crew comes home on April 20th. Following docking and hatch opening on Monday, the new crew, Expedition 15, will begin an 11-day handover from the current crew, Expedition 14 commander and NASA astronaut Mike Lopez Alegria, and flight engineers Mikhail Tirin and NASA astronaut Sonny Williams. Lopez Alegria and Tirin are today in their 201st day in space and their 199th day aboard the station, having arrived last September. Williams was launched to the station on the Shuttle Discovery last December on the STS-116 mission. She will remain on board with the new crew until later this summer, when she will trade places with NASA astronaut Clay Anderson. Anderson will be launched aboard the shuttle Endeavour on the STS-118 mission, and he will remain on board for several months as a flight engineer and science officer for both the Expedition 15 and 16 crews. Tonight's Soyuz mission launches under the call sign Pulsar, that was selected by Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov as symbolic of a star with a stable period of radiation. As Kotov put it, as stable as he hopes this expedition will be. Above his head in the center seat of the Soyuz for launch is a black cat toy with fuzzy dice named Dimmler, after Kotov's two children, Dima and Lara. Counterintuitively, Kotov says the black cat is there for good luck. We are about 45 minutes from the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10. We should be coming up very shortly on the point in the countdown where the launch pad tower would be retracted from the Soyuz vehicle, exposing it. After the Soyuz reached the launch pad during its rollout on Thursday, it was raised vertically from its railway car into the launch configuration, and the launch platform on this pad, the same pad that Yuri Gagarin was launched from 46 years ago, was rotated to the proper azimuth that the Soyuz will be launching in its 51.6-degree inclination, heading uphill to put it on the proper trajectory to the International Space Station.
Section 30, page 41. Copy. We will give you the preliminary time over tightening the shell.
You're now looking at video that was shot on Thursday morning of the rollout of the Soyuz TMA-10 from the Site 254 integration facility down in Baikonur. That is equivalent basically to the vehicle assembly building down at the Kennedy Space Center. The rollout began right at the crack of dawn at 7 a.m. Baikonur time, as the rail car, as is the tradition, began the slow 2.5-mile trek, basically going through a winding railway path from the integration facility out to the launch pad itself. The rollout took about 2.5 hours to complete, as the Soyuz TMA-10 again made its way through the winding barren steppes of Kazakhstan at the desolate Baikonur Cosmodrome. A very chilly morning, solid overcast accompanying the trip that was accompanied by security guards down in Baikonur every step of the way, as they watched and kept a careful eye on the rocket as it made its way to the launch pad. You're now seeing the rocket arrive at the launch pad, and again, hydraulics on that railway car lifted the Soyuz from its horizontal position to a vertical position on the launch pad, where the launch gantry was encapsulated around the Soyuz, permitting launch pad engineers and technicians access to the crew compartment, as well as the ability for launch pad engineers to hook up fuel lines and electrical connections to the Soyuz spacecraft and the rocket itself. Again, this is video that was shot on Thursday morning. And now you're seeing a live picture on the launch pad and the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan of the Soyuz TMA-10, fully fueled with liquid oxygen and kerosene. The launch tower still around the Soyuz. It should be moving back just momentarily to expose the Soyuz. You're seeing a good picture of the Soyuz on the launch pad. Again, launch is scheduled about 42 minutes from now at 12:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Central Time. That equates to 11:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Baikonur time. It will be a 9-minute ride from launch pad to orbit. And now you're seeing the clamshell launch tower beginning to retract to expose the Soyuz TMA-10. Again, everything going by the book tonight with the countdown and all of the activities associated with the preparations to send Expedition 15 Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin and Soyuz Commander and Flight Engineer Oleg Kotov, along with American businessman and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi, on their way to the International Space Station. The 3 stages of the Soyuz fully fueled with liquid oxygen and kerosene, everything in good shape for the Soyuz for its on-time launch about 41 minutes from now.
All stars, 1630, tighten your belts, doing that.
Now you're seeing our first in-cabin views of the night. On the left side of your screen, 58-year-old Charles Simonyi, the former software developer and executive with the Microsoft Corporation, seated in the right seat of the Soyuz vehicle. On the right, in the center seat, is Soyuz commander and flight engineer Oleg Kotov, the 41-year-old Russian Air Force colonel and medical doctor, both embarking on their first flight into space. Kotov will be joining Fyodor Yurchikhin for 6 months on board the International Space Station. They would remain on board until the Expedition 16 crew arrives on October 4th. Kotov and Yurchikhin will be returning home in this same Soyuz vehicle on October 13th. For Simonyi, tonight's launch begins 13 days in space, 11 days on board the International Space Station for his commercial agreement to fly in space with the Russian Federal Space Agency. Again, you're watching live coverage of tonight's launch of the Expedition 15 crew and American businessman Charles Simonyi from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan.
Introduce.
Everything continues to go by the timeline and by the schedule, as we are about 39 minutes away from launch. All of the Soyuz vehicle testing is now complete, and the 3 crew members inside the Soyuz, as they have been now for the past couple of hours, are performing final leak checks on their Sokol launch and entry suits. About 10 minutes from now, the emergency escape system for the Soyuz, that's basically that launch escape tower rocket that you see at the very top of the Soyuz vehicle, will be armed, and the launch command supply units will be activated for the Soyuz spacecraft. Back inside the Soyuz TMA-10, Oleg Kotov on the right side of your screen blowing kisses as he is in communications with launch conductors down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. Seated to his right on the left side of your screen, again, is Charles Simonyi, the American businessman who soon will be embarking on his first flight into space. You can see on the left side of your screen, that is the black cat toy that I referred to a moment ago, named Dimmler, after Kotov's 2 children, Dima and Lara. Kotov says that represents good luck. Basically, this is a mascot that each Soyuz commander selects for himself to represent vehicle motion once the spacecraft lifts off and begins its climb to orbit. Each Soyuz commander picks not only the mascot, but a call sign for the Soyuz for its 2-day trip from launch pad to the International Space Station. And again, on undocking and landing day, the call sign for Soyuz TMA-10 selected by Kotov is Pulsar. You're looking now at Video that was shot earlier today at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, a Russian Orthodox priest coming out of the Cosmonaut Hotel, which is the crew quarters on the outskirts of the Cosmodrome in the city of Baikonur. A fairly large crowd of well-wishers on hand to watch the crew walk out. They will be emerging from the Cosmonaut Hotel momentarily. This walkout occurred at 5:30 Central Time this morning, about 4:30 p.m. Baikonur time. The crew walked down a short tree-lined path, boarding a bus to travel about 40 minutes between the crew quarters and the Cosmonaut Hotel to begin their suit-up activities. Again, this is video shot just a few hours ago at the Cosmonaut Hotel. Simonyi on the left, Kotov in the center, and Fyodor Yurchikin on the right side of your screen. Also boarding the bus with the three crew members, Valery Korzun, who is the chief cosmonaut for the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, where this crew used as its training base, as all cosmonaut crews do, and for American astronauts. There is Kotov's wife holding up one of his children, Dima, as he waves goodbye, headed for the circuitous trip through the Baikonur Cosmodrome, about a 40-minute drive. You can see the crew bus now leaving the grounds of the Cosmonaut Hotel, headed out of the city of Baikonur into the Cosmodrome.
Go ahead. How's the weather? Any overcast? Well, it looks like it's cleared up. We can see stars now.
This video now shows the suit-up room at the Site 254 integration facility at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. This suit-up facility basically shows the crew after they suit up, they move into that room behind the glass partition. On the other side of the glass partition are a number of well-wishers, friends and family, and Russian space officials. The crew goes through a series of leak checks. We expect to see some of that video that was shot earlier today momentarily. At the Johnson Space Center in Houston, overseeing operations of the International Space Station and the Expedition 14 crew at the Mission Control Room, the team of flight controllers on duty at this hour, led by Flight Director Derek Hassman. Hassman has been on duty for the past several hours with the team that will be working in concert with their Russian counterparts tonight to oversee the launch of the Expedition 15 crew and the beginning of the two-day trip by the crew in their Soyuz capsule to dock with the station on Monday afternoon Central Time. Back to a video that was shot earlier today, just a few hours ago. You can see in this view on the right side of your screen, Sergei Ivanov, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia. On the left, that is Anatoly Permanov, who is the head of Roscosmos. Permanov accompanied Ivanov down to the Baikonur Cosmodrome to watch the launch tonight. They both spoke with the crew after the suit-up was completed. You'll be seeing the crew walking out shortly to make its final report to Permanov and to say a few final words to Ivanov before boarding their bus for the launch pad. You now see the crew emerging earlier today. Again, this video was shot a couple of hours ago. This taking place at about 9:30 a.m. Central Time, about 2.5 hours ago, just before the crew boarded for the launch pad. And again, the long walk down the path for the final report to the head of Roscosmos, Anatoly Permanov, and to the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, Sergei Ivanov. Charles Simonyi on the left, Oleg Kotov in the center, and Expedition 15 Space Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin on the right. On the left side of your screen, also joining for this final report, was Nikolai Sevastyanov, who is the head of RSC Energia. Behind Kotov, General Valery Korzun, who was the commander of the Expedition 5 crew several years ago. Korzun, now the chief cosmonaut at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, as they walked toward their bus to accompany the crew out to the launch pad, where they are now strapped in to a fully fueled rocket and ready for launch just 31 minutes from now. While you continue to watch this video of the crew heading from the sit-up facility at the Site 254 integration facility to the launch pad, we would remind you that now that we are at the 30-minute mark before launch, the emergency escape tower has been armed. All launch commands are now loaded into onboard computers in the Soyuz TMA-10 spacecraft. Now at the launch pad, in video that was shot about 2 hours or so ago, you see Soyuz commander and flight engineer Oleg Kotov as he is walking to the base of the rocket, along with Russian Deputy Prime Minister Sergei Ivanov and Anatoly Permanov, the head of the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos. You will see the crew climbing the stairs to the base of the rocket before boarding the elevator that took them up to the level where the crew compartment is, so that they could begin to board the Soyuz. There's Fyodor Yurchikhin, Charles Simonyi, Oleg Kotov. Final waves and farewells for the crew before they climbed into the elevator to ride up to the crew cabin level of the Soyuz TMA-10. Again, the same pad used on April 12th, 1961, almost 46 years to the day. Yuri Gagarin climbed those same stairs and rode the same elevator to enter the Vostok 1 for his ride into space and into the history books. Now back at the launch site, you're seeing a view now of the Soyuz TMA-10. This is live from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. The crew has been aboard the Soyuz for about 2 hours now. Continuous checks being made of spacecraft systems. The countdown proceeding on schedule for liftoff at 12:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Central Time, about 27 minutes from now. That will be 11:31 p.m. and 9 seconds down in Baikonur. Again, launch precisely timed for the moment when the Earth's rotation will carry the Baikonur Cosmodrome into the plane of the International Space Station's orbit for a rendezvous and docking with the station 2 days from now. At the time of tonight's launch, the International Space Station will be orbiting over the Pacific Ocean directly over the equator. On board the station, Expedition 14 Commander Mike Lopez Alegria and flight engineers Mikhail Turin and Sonny Williams are awake. With any luck at all, they should be able to see a live television picture uplinked to them on the U.S. Ku-band communications system of the launch of the Soyuz rocket. We may also be able to receive some television from the station as they watch the launch inside the Destiny laboratory of the International Space Station. And you're looking at a live picture from the balcony overlooking the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov in the suburb of Moscow. Again, all preparations going very smoothly. No issues being reported as we head for an on-time liftoff of Soyuz about 25 and a half minutes from now. Down in Baikonur, the temperature is in the low 40s as the launch time will approach midnight Baikonur time tonight. The Baikonur Cosmodrome has been under fairly heavy cloud cover for several days with chilly temperatures and a light drizzle over the past 24 hours, but the rain has subsided, and although it is overcast down in Baikonur for launch, again, the temperature around 42 degrees or so. Out on the launch pad, the Soyuz's telemetry systems and steering jets have now been activated. During the climb to orbit, again, as we said before, tracking and telemetry is downlinked to ground stations along the flight path and routed back here to the Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow. Russian Flight Director Alexander Lobasov is presiding over tonight's launch, overseeing a group of flight controllers ready to begin monitoring the Soyuz following its launch and its insertion into its preliminary orbit. A group of Moscow-based U.S. flight controllers known as the Houston Support Group are led tonight by Flight Controller Steve Quenneville. They are joined this evening by NASA astronaut Mike Foale, who was commander of the station's Expedition 8 crew as a second set of eyes expert in Soyuz systems. Foale will be remaining here for the next 2 weeks to assist with docking, and on April 20th with the return of the Expedition 14 crew and Charles Simonyi. The HSG, as the group is known, works with its Russian counterparts, just as a Russian team of flight controllers works with NASA personnel at Mission Control in Houston. You're looking now at the picture of Mike Foale, who arrived here at the control center earlier today. That a live picture of the Soyuz TMA-10 out on the launch pad, about a mile and a half away from the VIP viewing site where Russian space officials have gathered along with the small delegation of NASA officials who are on hand for tonight's liftoff. It's about 9 minutes from launch to orbital insertion after third stage separation and the jettisoning of the third stage of the Soyuz rocket. All three stages of the Soyuz filled with liquid oxygen and kerosene. You see the liquid oxygen venting as is the normal practice for the Soyuz on the launch pad. Again, down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, this crew of Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin, Soyuz Commander and Flight Engineer Oleg Kotov, and U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi arrived back on March 27th for what typically now has become about 11 days of flight plan review and relaxation, as well as 2 dress rehearsals, one called the suited fit check, in which the crew climbs into its launch and entry suits, goes into the integration facility, and climbs inside the Soyuz capsule for what is tantamount to the equivalent of the Space Shuttle's countdown demonstration test. The terminal countdown demonstration test at the Kennedy Space Center takes place about 3 or so weeks before a Space Shuttle launch. In this case, the crew climbs into its launch and entry suits, climbs aboard the Soyuz in the integration facility before the capsule itself is mated to the booster rocket for dress rehearsal to familiarize themselves with the crew cabin. Then a few days later, during the course of its 11 days down in Baikonur, the crew will visit the spacecraft one more time in their flight suits in what is called an unsuited fit check, in which they once again review switch configurations and cockpit systems before the capsule is mated to the booster itself. You're looking at the upper stage. That is the shroud or the fairing around which the Soyuz TMA-10 is encapsulated, and of course the launch escape tower that would fire to pull the capsule away from the third stage in the unlikely event a contingency occurred that would require the crew to break free from the rest of the booster rocket. We're now 20 minutes away from the launch of the Soyuz vehicle. Everything continuing to go on track. The crew continuing to perform leak tests of their so-called launch and entry suits, and to place their personal escape hardware, parachutes, and life preserver rafts into an automatic mode that would accompany them in the unlikely event they would have to pull free from the Soyuz rocket. As we mentioned earlier, about 30 minutes ago or so, an onboard timing device was initiated to control the final major events leading up to liftoff. This Soyuz TMA-10 vehicle you're seeing in this live picture in the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan has been used in various sizes and various configurations for more than 40 years to launch humans and satellites into space. It now stands ready, just minutes from now, to launch Expedition 15 toward the International Space Station.
The 15th expedition to the International Space Station is the first long-duration space flight for both Russian members of the crew. But it's a trip they've had their sights set on since they were boys in the 1960s. Fyodor Nikolaevich Yurchikhin was born in the Black Sea port city of Batumi in Georgia. He had just turned 2 when Yuri Gagarin made history, and he grew up in a place and a time where all the boys wanted to become cosmonauts.
John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Yuri Gagarin, Tereshkova, those were my heroes, the heroes of my time. And I remember that time. And I know I wanted to be a cosmonaut since I was very little. I went to school for the first time during the first grade, and a teacher asked me who we wanted to be when we grow up. And I said I wanted to be a goalkeeper of a hockey team. And the teacher explained it's not really a profession. And I said, oh, in terms of a profession, I wanted to be a cosmonaut. So for me, it was not a question to debate whether I wanted to be a cosmonaut or not.
And he never changed his mind. After high school, he left home to study at the Moscow Aviation Institute and graduated in 1983 as a mechanical engineer specializing in aerospace vehicles. His career began at the Rocket Space Corporation Energia, working as an engineer in the Russian Mission Control Center outside Moscow, where in 1989 he entertained a group of students that included a future American colleague, Mike Fink. For a time, Yurchikhin served aboard Russian communication ships during space flights. By the mid-90s, he was a lead engineer in the Mir shuttle program.
Then we went to Houston for the first time, training to dock with STS-74. It was an interesting period for me. First negotiations with the U.S. counterparts on creating a new station.
He began training as a cosmonaut for Energia in 1997 and graduated to the rank of test cosmonaut in 1999 to start training for the ISS program. He also earned a doctorate in economics from the Moscow Service State University in 2001. Late that year, Yurchikhin was named to the crew of shuttle mission STS-112, and he spent almost 11 days in space on that October 2002 mission, which delivered and installed the S-1 truss to the ISS. Late last year, he was announced as the commander of Expedition 15, alongside a Russian colleague preparing for his first spaceflight. Oleg Valerievich Kotov was born in the city of Simferopol in southern Ukraine on the Crimean Peninsula in 1965. He was another boy who aspired to be the next Gagarin.
A childhood dream? Yes, of course. There are probably hardly any boys of my generation who didn't want to be a cosmonaut.
For young Oleg, it was just one dream. After he graduated high school in Moscow, he honored a family tradition by studying at the Kirov Military Medical Academy.
When I started going to the medical school, the question arose of what my specialization would be, and I wanted to become a specialist in space medicine.
By the time he graduated in 1988, Kotov had earned his pilot's wings in the Russian Air Force and his medical degree.
When I had to make the choice of where to go to work after I graduated from the academy, probably my subconscious spoke, or my childhood dream got involved. I chose to go to the Cosmonaut Training Center, Star City,
where he worked on the issue of countering the negative effects of weightlessness on cosmonauts in space.
And at a certain point in time, when I had the opportunity to turn in my application and go through the medical exam and apply to the Cosmonaut Corps, I did take that chance.
Kotov was selected for cosmonaut training by the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in 1996 and has been a cosmonaut researcher since 1998, when he began training for missions to the International Space Station.
Back here at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow, the countdown being monitored by Russian flight controllers as it is at the Johnson Space Center in Houston in Mission Control, as two teams of flight controllers are awaiting the liftoff that will propel the Expedition 15 crew and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi of the United States to orbit to begin their two-day chase to catch up to the International Space Station. You're looking at a live picture of the Soyuz TM-810 on the launch pad, fully fueled, ready for flight, about 13 minutes from now. Now inside 13 minutes to launch, all pre-launch parameters are reported by Russian flight controllers to be right on the money. Everything looking very good for the Soyuz. Aboard the Soyuz TM-810, Fyodor Yurchikhin, Oleg Kotov, and Charles Simonyi have completed the leak tests of their spacesuits. That's reported in good shape. The crew has activated and engaged all of their personal escape equipment in the unlikely event they would have to pull free from the third stage of the Soyuz during powered flight through the launch escape tower, that tower that you see at the very top of the Soyuz rocket. The music that you're hearing is being piped in to the crew aboard the Soyuz TMA-10 by the launch control team in a bunker down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. This is always done to essentially keep the crew relaxed. Personal favorite music of the crew that they select before they head down to the Baikonur Cosmodrome for final pre-launch preparations. We're coming up on the 10-minute mark to launch, just about 2 minutes from now. The gyroscopes for the boosters will be activated, and the crew will also be activating onboard recorders. After launch, as we said earlier, the flight control teams at the Johnson Space Center in Houston and at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov here will spend the next 2 days watching over the rendezvous of the Soyuz with the International Space Station, with docking scheduled to occur at mid-afternoon Central Time on Monday, late Monday night Moscow time. Now back inside the Soyuz TMA-10 spacecraft, you see U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi on the left side of your screen. On the right, in the center seat of the Soyuz, fiddling with the toy black cat that he chose as his mascot for the Soyuz is Oleg Kotov, the Soyuz commander and flight engineer, a 41-year-old Russian Air Force colonel and medical doctor.
Copy. 5 minutes readiness. Closing. Visors. The crew is doing well. Thank you very much for your support.
And as you can see, the crew has been instructed to close and lock its visors for launch. Normally, for a daytime launch, once the shroud covering the third stage would be jettisoned, the crew would have sunlight streaming into the cabin, but not tonight, of course, launching in the dead of night. The launch time, 11:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Baikonur time. The crew will be making its way on a 51.6-degree inclination, launching to the northeast from the Baikonur Cosmodrome to begin the 2-day chase to catch up to the International Space Station, with a docking schedule to the Earth-facing port of the Zarya module, the first component of the station launched on a Proton rocket from Baikonur back on November 20th, 1998. The docking on Monday to be followed about 90 minutes later by the opening of hatches to the station and the initial greetings by the Expedition 14 crew, which will be watching the launch tonight on an uplink of video from Baikonur to Houston, relayed through the Ku-band communication system to Mike Lopez Alegria, Mikhail Turin, and Sonny Williams. The crew that you're looking at, Simonyi on the left, Kotov on the right side of your screen, has been aboard the Soyuz for about 2 hours now, conducting final systems checks with Russian launch controllers at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Just out of the field of view is Fyodor Yurchikhin, who is seated just off camera to the right in the left seat of the Soyuz TMA-10.
We are watching you. We are checking the onboard documentation.
Less than 8 minutes to launch. All pre-launch operations now complete. In about a minute and a half, the launch controllers down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome will place a key in the launch command system that will induce the automatic program that will control all critical vehicle functions for the final 5 minutes prior to the liftoff of the Soyuz. 6.5 minutes away from the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10 and a new crew to the International Space Station. On board the station itself, the Expedition 14 crew eagerly awaiting the arrival of its replacements. You can see in this live downlink view from the Destiny laboratory of the station, Flight Engineer Sonny Williams, Mikhail Turin. Just out of the field of view is Mike Lopez Alegria, the current station commander. They will be watching a video of the launch that will be uplinked to them from the U.S. Ku-band communication system. For Turin and Mike Lopez Alegria, this is their 201st day in space. Sonny Williams will remain on board with Yurchikhin and Kotov once they arrive and complete an 11-day handover from Lopez Alegria and Turin. Back now to this view of the Soyuz TMA-10 out on the launch pad. You can see the upper stage of the Soyuz, and now the other view of the crew inside Soyuz. On the left, Oleg Kotov, the Soyuz commander, in the center seat, and to his left, in the left seat, playing the role tonight of the onboard flight engineer for Ascent, is Space Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin, about to begin his second flight into space, having flown aboard the shuttle Atlantis in 2002 on the STS-112 mission that delivered the S-1, the Starboard 1 truss, to the complex.
For launch.
Just 4.5 minutes away from the launch of the Soyuz, we're standing by for the purge of the Soyuz's engine combustion chambers with nitrogen. That will precede the booster tanks being pressurized for flight. Countdown right on the money, right on track for an on-time liftoff at 12:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Central Time, 11:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Baikonur time. At the time of launch, the International Space Station, with Mike Lopez Alegria, Mikhail Turin, and Sonny Williams aboard, will be traveling over the central Pacific Ocean right on the equator.
Telemetry recorder 2.
Coming up on the 3-minute mark in the countdown. The engine combustion chambers now have been purged with nitrogen. Standing by for the pressurization of the flight booster tanks.
Inaudible.
On board the Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov on the left. On the right, Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin, poised for launch with their third crew member, U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi. It is an overcast night at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, not raining at the moment, temperatures in the low to mid 40s.
Purge.
Now 2 minutes from launch, all systems are go for launch, according to Russian launch controllers down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Less than a minute from now, the Soyuz will be placed on internal power and the automatic launch sequencer will be initiated. Less than a minute from the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10 and new residents to the International Space Station. The Soyuz on internal power. The automatic launch sequencer has been activated.
Reporting.
The first umbilical tower has separated from the booster. 30 seconds away, standing by for the second umbilical tower to move back from the Soyuz. All engines ready on the Soyuz. First stage engines now at flight speed. The second umbilical tower has backed away. T-minus 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition.
Preliminary, intermediate.
And liftoff. Liftoff of the Soyuz rocket transporting new residents to the International Space Station. The Soyuz has cleared the tower. Pitch and roll program initiated according to flight controllers. Soyuz headed on the proper trajectory and azimuth for its two-day chase to reach the International Space Station.
Feeling well. Load in order.
Good first stage performance reported. The Soyuz delivering 102 tons of thrust from its 4 boosters and single core engine.
The norm. Copy. Everything is in order on board. Vibration increasing. Copy.
40 seconds into the flight, roll and pitch program reported to be nominal, according to Russian flight controllers. Velocity picking up as the Soyuz darts through a hole in the clouds high above the Baikonur Cosmodrome in central Kazakhstan.
50 seconds. Spin within the norm. The crew is doing well. The loads are increasing. 80 seconds.
Everything continuing to go well as the Soyuz heads downrange. Velocity now 1,100 miles per hour, or 500 meters per second. Riding a good first stage.
Normal parameters. Systems within the norm. The load.
Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov reporting normal parameters on board the Soyuz.
Nominal on.
Kotov seated in the center seat on the left side of your screen. Fyodor Yurchikin on the right side of your screen.
Your role in order. Operations as planned, utilization of the system normal.
Everything is reported in nominal condition. The jettison of the 4 strap-on boosters have been accomplished. They had dropped away at an altitude of 28 statute miles, Soyuz traveling at about 3,400 miles an hour. We now have had the jettisoning of the escape tower and launch shroud. A very smooth ride for the Expedition 15 crew and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi.
Ignition. Control systems. Nominal 180 seconds stabilization.
The Soyuz second stage performing as advertised, 3.5 minutes into the flight. The second stage of the Soyuz, 56 feet in length, 13.5 feet in diameter, with a single engine providing 96 tons of thrust for about 3.5 minutes of operation. The crew with a thumbs up on board the Soyuz TMA-10, the flight proceeding right down the pipeline. Kotov continues to bat away at his black cat toy, which he says is good luck for the crew. Pulsar 1, the call sign for the Soyuz, as the Soyuz heads downrange toward its preliminary orbit. 4 minutes into the flight, the second stage continuing to perform as advertised. A good ride so far for Expedition 15 and Charles Simonyi.
Copy. Now we are watching the third crew member.
4.5 minutes into the flight, you see Charles Simonyi, the American businessman, former software developer and executive of the Microsoft Corporation, seated in the right seat of the Soyuz. You get a sense of how gentle the Soyuz ride is to orbit.
This is nominal.
All parameters on the Soyuz reported normal.
Everything is in order on board.
Coming up on the 5-minute point into the flight, we're standing by for the burnout of the second stage and separation.
280 seconds, expecting separation of the second stage. Copy, course separation.
5 minutes into the flight, second stage separation reported. The 4 liquid fuel engines have completed their task for today, now dropping away. About 4 minutes of powered flight remaining. The Soyuz now being propelled by the single engine of the Soyuz's third stage, providing 30 tons of thrust, burning for about 4 minutes and 2 seconds.
$320 seconds in flight, nominal flight.
Thumbs up from your Chicken on the right, Kotov on the left, in the center seat of Soyuz commander. Everything proceeding perfectly for the Soyuz TMA-10 at the 6-minute mark into the flight. About 3 minutes of powered flight remaining. Soyuz headed downrange, uphill.
350 seconds in flight, nominal flight.
Launch controllers reporting that all pitch and roll maneuvers are proceeding per the pre-programmed flight sequence. The Soyuz heading right down the track towards its preliminary orbit. Shortly after the third stage shuts down and separates, the Soyuz will be in its preliminary orbit, after which the solar arrays and navigation antennas will be deployed for Yurchikhin, Kotov, and Simonyi.
400 seconds into nominal flight, stabilization, and spin within the norm.
7 minutes into the flight, the Soyuz now traveling at about 18,500 feet per second. We are almost 2 minutes away from third stage separation. Everything continuing to go very normally for the Soyuz TMA-10.
430 minutes in flight, nominal flight. No issues with the vehicle.
Aboard the International Space Station, the Expedition 14 crew, Mike Lopez Alegria on the left, Sonny Williams in the center, Mikhail Turin on the right, watching the climb to orbit for their replacement. Sonny Williams, of course, will be staying on board the station with Yurchikhin and Kotov until she is replaced later this summer by NASA astronaut Clay Anderson, who will be delivered on the STS-118 mission. Again, the Expedition 14 crew watching the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10 and the Expedition 15 crew. This crew will be arriving on Monday to begin 11 days of handover operations. Now back inside at the 8-minute, 18-second point into the flight. Soyuz traveling over 20,000 feet per second. Less than a minute of powered flight remaining, standing by for third stage cutoff and separation.
The crew is doing well on board. Copy. 500 seconds into nominal flight.
Computer commands, stored commands, called time tag commands, will be initiated as soon as the third stage is shut down and separated to provide all of the automatic onboard functions for Soyuz during its 2 days of free flight. And we have third stage cutoff and separation. The single liquid fuel engine is now shut down and dropped away at an altitude of 125 statute miles. We're standing by now for solar array and navigation antenna deploy.
Inaudible. This is Perminov, Mr. Perminov from Roscosmos.
At Mission Control in Houston, visiting vehicle officer Tremaine Days reports to Flight Director Derek Hossman a nominal deployment of the Soyuz solar arrays and its navigation antennas. The Expedition 15 crew now in its preliminary orbit, headed for the International Space Station. It was a perfect countdown and a perfect launch tonight for the next resident crew for the International Space Station. Yurchikhin, Kotov, and Simonyi, 2 days from now, will engage in a link-up in space as the Soyuz and the International Space Station dock to one another high over Russian ground stations over the Ukraine. The docking will continue the transition of one space station crew to the next. Again, continuing to take downlink television from inside the descent module, the middle module of the three-module Soyuz TMA-10. This spacecraft now will perform a series of rendezvous maneuvers over the course of the next several hours to raise its altitude and circularize its orbit relative to the International Space Station.
Okay.
There will be a third burn of the Soyuz rockets on Sunday before the terminal phase of the rendezvous begins on Monday.
Propulsion
13 days from now, with its handover completed, Expedition 14, minus NASA astronaut Sonny Williams, but with spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi, will board the Soyuz currently docked at the station's Zvezda service module and return home after 7 months in space, leaving Expedition 15 to oversee the ongoing research and operation of the space station. During its increment, Expedition 15, Yurchikhin and Kotov, along with Sonny Williams and Clay Anderson, will be visited by 2 Progress resupply vehicles, 2 space shuttles. The crew will conduct at least 3 spacewalks to continue the assembly and outfitting of the orbital outpost. Yurchikhin, Kotov, and Williams, later to be joined by Clay Anderson, will set the stage for the arrival later this year of the Harmony Connecting Node, formerly known as Node 2, the maiden flight of the Jules Verne European Automated Transfer Vehicle cargo craft, and the subsequent deliveries of the European Columbus and Japanese Kibo research modules. A very busy year coming up for the International Space Station.
Soup 17. Here are the parameters on page 45. Item 17, 17.2, 18, 17.2, 19.
We will be passing out of range shortly of Russian ground stations, at which point we'll lose our in-cabin view of Oleg Kotov on the left in the center seat of the Soyuz, who served as Soyuz commander, as well as Fyodor Yurchikhin on the right, in the left seat of the Soyuz. Out of the field of view at the moment is U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi, who sat in the right seat of the Soyuz during tonight's climb to orbit. Over the next several orbits, the crew aboard the TMA-10 will be monitoring checkouts of all of the motion control system functions. They will reactivate the motion control system, establish their attitude reference for the onboard computers as they begin their chase to catch up to the International Space Station on Monday afternoon U.S. time, Monday night Moscow time. There will be 2 engine burns, one at 4:06 p.m. Central Time, the other at 4:55 p.m. Central Time. Again, the first to raise the orbital altitude of Soyuz, the second to circularize the orbit as Soyuz now begins its path to refine and fine-tune its trek to the International Space Station.
We are on page 59.
Время сеанса связи 22:02.
22.
Procedure open. Can you just give me in layman's terms what that means?
020.
From the rack or from a brick?
Yeah, we're coming off the brick. You'll wind up in the third option inside the starry block.
20. TRSP. Here.
The International Space Station is currently traveling about 220 statute miles above the southern Pacific Ocean. You again saw momentarily a view of Sonny Williams in the Destiny Laboratory of the International Space Station. The crew recently began what amounts to an off-duty day. They'll spend the weekend tidying up their orbital outpost as they prepare for the arrival of the Expedition 15 crew, Yurchikhin and Kotov, and spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi on Monday.
Dear command link. Could you please give me the time again? 20:50:00. Copy. This is command link. Or 21:00:30 as a backup. Copy.
15 minutes after launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, Oleg Kotov on the left, Fyodor Yurchikhin on the right, continue to follow their flight plan. The crew is currently reporting on the pressurization of the orbital maneuvering system and reaction control jet system, as well as all environmental systems on the Soyuz TMA-10. The thermal sensors for entry are being manually deactivated now that the Soyuz is safely in its preliminary orbit. Ground controllers, now that the control of critical vehicle functions and the next 2 days of free flight for the Soyuz toward the International Space Station, control of this mission now has converted from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan to the Russian Mission Control Center here in Korolyov outside Moscow. Over the next several orbits where the Russian ground stations are within range, now that the Soyuz will be passing over Russian ground stations over the next several orbits, there will be a series of pre-programmed commands to check out all of the Soyuz systems, as well as reports by the crew of their condition and the condition of the Soyuz systems for the flight controllers here in Korolyov. The crew is going to be awake for several hours yet. They are not scheduled to go to bed for several hours as they begin to match up their wake-sleep cycle to that of the International Space Station crew on orbit. The Soyuz crew actually will be awake for just over 7 hours now. A very long day for them. They'll be going to bed in orbit at 8 p.m. Central Time for about an 11-hour sleep period, waking up just before 7 a.m. Central Time on Sunday in their second day of flight toward the International Space Station. A smooth and uneventful climb to orbit for the Expedition 15 crew. An on-time launch at 12:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Central Time, 11:31 p.m. and 9 seconds Baikonur time, as the Soyuz TMA-10 darted through clouds high over central Kazakhstan to reach orbit and to begin its 2-day trek to the International Space Station.
Pulsars, Mission Control, Moscow, go ahead. The vehicle is in orbit. You may turn off the...
We now can go back to the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan for a series of replays of the launch of Fyodor Yurchikhin, Oleg Kotov, and Charles Simonyi that took place about 19 minutes ago on time at 11:31 and 9 seconds p.m. Baikonur time. While we wait for additional replays of the launch from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, We can report that aboard the International Space Station, Expedition 14 Commander Mike Lopez Alegria, flight engineers Sonny Williams and Mikhail Turin, who were treated to a live view of the launch that was uplinked to them through the U.S. band communication system, will be entering into what is known as a weekly planning conference with flight controllers at Mission Control at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Again, you're looking at replays of the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10 that occurred about 20 minutes ago at 12:31 p.m. and 9 seconds Central Time. Once again, you're watching replays of the launch of the Soyuz TMA-10 that occurred about 21 minutes ago down at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. There were mostly cloudy skies. You see the Soyuz darting through those clouds en route for its 9-minute venture to orbit. At the launch site, a number of dignitaries viewed tonight's launch, including the Russian Deputy Prime Minister Sergei Ivanov, the head of the Russian Federal Space Agency, Anatoly Perminov, a small NASA delegation led by Phil Cleary, the Director of Human Spaceflight Programs in Russia. Charles Simonyi also had a large delegation of guests who attended the launch tonight, including the Chief Executive Officer of the Microsoft Corporation, Paul Allen, and daytime television personality Martha Stewart, who is a friend of Simonyi.
Internationale Raumstation ISS. An Bord ist auch der 5. Weltraumtourist seit Beginn der Flüge ins All. Um Punkt 19:31 Uhr hat für den Software-Milliardär Charles Simonyi das Abenteuer seines Lebens begonnen. Er startete zusammen mit 2 Kosmonauten. Der Softwareentwickler der Microsoft-Programme Word und Excel bezahlte für die Reise geschätzte 16 Milliarden Euro.
And liftoff of the Soyuz rocket transporting new residents to the International Space Station.
Charles Simonyi blasted off on board a Russian Soyuz spacecraft just about 40 minutes ago. Simonyi developed Microsoft Word and parlayed his business success to become a billionaire. He paid about just $20 million to take this 12-day voyage. Earlier, he shared some of his reasons for making the trip.
I have 3 goals. One of them is to advance civilian spaceflight. I think it's very important. I want to assist with space station research because it's still a rare opportunity to do this, and I should do what I can to help. And I also like to draw kids to sciences, and I think that space is a very natural way of raising kids' interests.
U.S. lifestyle guru Martha Stewart, a close friend of Simonyi's, traveled to Kazakhstan to witness the launch. She created a special dinner menu that Simonyi will be sharing with his space station colleagues next week. And that leads us to our question of the day to you. We've been asking you, if you could afford it, would you become a space tourist? And here's how some of you responded. Annabelle from Germany would rather spend her money on education in developing countries. She writes, I wouldn't dare be a space tourist. It would be an experience of a lifetime, but the cost of the trip would be much more beneficial to mankind. But Efe in Nigeria has a different take. He thinks the trip would bring him closer to mankind. He writes, I would like to see the world and creation from the other side. It would make me love and understand creation from a different dimension. So what do you think? If you could afford it, would you become a space tourist? Or do you think it's too risky? Or do you think the money can be spent better in another way? Send your responses to yourviews@cnn.com.
Vor gut 2 Stunden hat sich die neue Langzeitbesatzung der internationalen Raumstation ISS auf den Weg gemacht. Eine russische Soyuz-Rakete brachte sie vom Raumfahrtbahnhof Baikonur ins All. An Bord ist auch der bislang 5. Weltraumtourist, der Software-Milliardär Charles Simonyi. Gezahlt für die 12 Tage Schwerelosigkeit hat er umgerechnet etwa 15 Millionen Euro.
Well, and this leads us to our question of the day. We are asking you today, if you could afford it, would you become a space tourist? And here's how some of you responded. The Nyati from American Samoa writes, quote, I would rather use the money for a worthy cause like feeding the poor or invest in medical research that somewhere down the line benefits mankind. But Sadran in Afghanistan has a different take. Here's what he wrote. Quote, yes, I have had this dream since I was 7 years old. I hope to see the world from the other side, but you must have enough money. Without that, it's impossible. So what do you think? If you can afford it, would you become a space tourist, or do you think it's too risky, or are there other worthy causes? Send your responses to yourviews@cnn.com, and remember to include your name and where you're writing to us from.
Die 15. Langzeitbesatzung der internationalen Raumstation ISS ist am Samstagabend ins All gestartet. Die Trägerrakete vom Typ Sojus fuhr pünktlich um 19:31 Uhr vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur in Kasachstan ab. Die beiden russischen Kosmonauten Fjodor Jotschitschin und Oleg Kotov sollen ihre Kollegen ablösen und ein halbes Jahr im All bleiben. Die beiden Kosmonauten gelten als wenig erfahren, Kotov war zuvor noch nie im Weltraum. Am Montagabend soll die Sojus-Kapsel an der ISS andocken. An Bord der Kapsel befindet sich auch der amerikanische Software-Milliardär Charles Simonyi. Er ist der 5. Weltraumtourist der Geschichte. Für seinen 12-Tage-Trip ins All soll er etwa 16 Millionen Euro bezahlt haben. Für seine russischen Mitbewohner hat Simonyi eine Überraschung dabei. Am 12. April, dem Tag des russischen Kosmonauten, soll es auf der ISS ein Festmenü geben mit Wachteln und Entenbrust.
Im Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur in Kasachstan ist der Weltraumtourist Charles Simonyi pünktlich um 19:31 Uhr gestartet. Er ist der 5. Weltraumtourist der Geschichte. Begleitet wird der 58-Jährige von 2 Astronauten. Der Softwareentwickler wird 13 Tage in der internationalen Raumstation ISS verbringen.
Milliardär hat's gar nicht schwer. Für 15 Millionen Euro geht's schnurstracks ab ins All. All-inclusive. Charles Simonyi heißt der reiche Amerikaner, der mit dem Flug zur Raumstation ISS seinen Traum wahr machte. Und schick gemacht hat er sich dazu auch noch. Am Tag vor dem Start ging der gebürtige Ungar extra noch mal zum Friseur. Allhopping, fast schon ein Trendsport für Milliardäre. Beate Willer.
Wovon träumt man, wenn man schon alles Irdische hat? Man greift nach den Sternen. So wie der US-Milliardär und Softwareentwickler Charles Simonyi. Vom kasachischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ist er mit dem Kosmonauten Fjodor Jotschitschin und Oleg Kotov ins All gestartet. Als Glücksbringer dabei eine selbstprogrammierte russische Computerlochkarte von 1964. Der 58-Jährige ist gebürtiger Ungar. Auch andere gut betuchte Sternenfahrer sind Auswanderer und haben ihr Glück in den USA gemacht. Aus Italien stammt der erste Alltourist der Raumfahrtgeschichte. Der US-Multimillionär Dennis Tito schwebte 2001 im 7. Himmel.
Das Leben im All hier ist ganz anders als das Leben auf der Erde. Von hier oben schwerelos runterzusehen ist einfach einmalig spektakulär.
Erste Frau im All, die im Iran geborene Multimillionärin Anousheh Ansari. Sie war 1982 in die USA ausgewandert. Grund, sie hatte in ihrer Heimat keine naturwissenschaftlichen Fächer studieren können. Insgesamt 5 Weltraumtouristen haben bisher nach den Sternen gegriffen. 15 Millionen Euro fürs Alltaxi, Peanuts für Multimillionäre. Ein schönes Zubrot für Russlands Raumfahrt.
Ungewöhnlich kaltes Winterwetter gegeben. Wie hier im Bundesstaat Texas schneite es in zahlreichen Bundesstaaten stark. Bauern befürchten, ihre Ernte könnte Schaden nehmen. Kinder sind da sorgloser. Wie hier in Ohio suchen sie ihre Ostereier einfach im Schnee.
Rund 100.000 Gläubige waren bei strahlendem Sonnenschein auf den Petersplatz gekommen, um dabei zu sein, als Benedikt den Segen in 62 Sprachen spendete.
Greco, Christos anesti, Albanese, Hörschum viet Paschket, Tedesco. Euch allen ein gesegnetes und frohes Osterfest. Der Friede und die Freude des auferstandenen Herrn sei mit euch.
Zuvor hatte der Papst Terrorismus, Geiselnahmen und andere Formen der Gewalt angeprangert, die nicht selten sogar im Namen des Glaubens begangen würden. Neben dem Vatikan schaute die christliche Welt heute vor allem wieder nach Jerusalem. Denn hier, so sind sich die Christen aller Glaubensrichtungen einig, wurde Jesus vor knapp 2000 Jahren gekreuzigt. Und hier soll er auch wieder auferstanden sein von den Toten. Deshalb strömten heute Zehntausende Christen aus aller Welt in die heilige Stadt, um das Osterfest hier zu begehen. Christoph Sagurner war mit dabei.
Noch zeigt sich die Sonne auf dem Ölberg über Jerusalem nicht, noch brauchen die deutschen Pilger Kerzen für ihre Liedertexte, in denen sie den Tag preisen, den Tag der Auferstehung. Die Wüste Judäa liegt noch dunkel im Osten.
Schöner, österlicher und früher kann man den Ostersonntag wohl kaum begrüßen. Zum Sonnenaufgang über der Wüste Judäa feiern die deutschen Lutheraner in Jerusalem die Auferstehung Christi.
Im Tal dämmert es und die ersten Sonnenstrahlen zeigen, dass dort längst nicht alles österlicher Friede ist. Die berüchtigte Sperrmauer, die Juden von Palästinensern trennt, schlängelt sich durchs Morgengrauen.
Während früher die Gottesdienste hier wirklich etwas Heiteres hatten und man sich darauf freute, ins Tal schauen zu können, ist der Blick heute ins Tal hinunter gegenüber der Mauer und dem Checkpoint da und so doch ziemlich bitter geworden. Und man sieht eben, dass die Wirklichkeit das heilige Land eingeholt hat und immer weniger Heiligkeit zu spüren ist.
Die alte, heilige Stadt Jerusalem erwacht. Glockengeläut, auch in der deutschen Abtei Hagia Maria feiern Christen, Benediktiner, das Osterfest. Hier soll Jesus aufgebahrt gewesen sein, glauben einige. Die Steinplatte wird inbrünstig angebetet. Wir sind in der Grabeskirche, wo heute hinter jeder Säule eine andere Ostermesse gelesen wird.
Die Katholiken, die Protestanten, die griechisch, die russisch-orthodoxen, die Kopten, die Armenier, alle haben ihre ganz eigene Version davon, was hier in der Grabeskirche nach dem Tod am Kreuz passiert ist. Aber alle auf ihre eigene Art glauben schließlich daran, dass Jesus hier vom Tod auferstanden ist.
Und das feiern sie alle auf ihre Art, wie auch dieser Berliner Kinderzirkus vor der Grabeskirche, zumindest solange ihn die israelische Polizei lässt.
Und Klagemauer, die christlichen Stätten, das steht auf dem Programm von zigtausenden Jerusalem-Besuchern an diesen Feiertagen. Abu Hassan bietet ein politisches Alternativprogramm an, die sogenannte Mauertour. Im Kleinbus werden diesmal Touristen aus Kanada, Irland, Italien und Deutschland an der Sperranlage entlang gefahren. Sie trennt nicht nur Israelis von Palästinensern, mancherorts blockiert sie Zugänge zu Krankenhäusern, Schulen, Arbeitsstätten. Der Reiseführer klagt: Wie soll so Frieden entstehen? Das wird nie etwas. Israels oberster Gerichtshof hat den Bau der Sperranlage aus Sicherheitsgründen für rechtens erklärt. Seit sie entsteht, ist die Zahl der Terroranschläge drastisch zurückgegangen. Ein Schnappschuss vor der Mauer. Für diese Ostertouristen ist es das Erinnerungsbild. Es herrscht auch Betroffenheit.
Es ist doch anders, wenn man zum Beispiel vor der Mauer steht und sieht, wie hoch sie wirklich ist. Das kann keine Dokumentation so rüberbringen.
Als Kanadier fällt es einem schwer, das hier zu verstehen. 89 Kilometer Sperranlage sind im Großraum Jerusalem bereits gebaut. Viele Besucher der historischen Altstadt bekommen sie gar nicht zu sehen. Aber die Osterbotschaft mit dem Thema Frieden sprach jeden an.
Die Langzeitbesatzung der internationalen Raumstation ist vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur aus gestartet. Zusammen mit den 2 Kosmonauten reist der 5. Weltraumtourist, der Milliardär Charles Simonyi. Der Entwickler von Computerprogrammen wie Microsoft Word hat geschätzte 16 Millionen Euro für den 12-tägigen Trip ins All bezahlt. Im Gepäck hat er ein Gourmet-Menü mit Wachteln und kandierten Früchten für sich und die anderen Raumfahrer. Die Soyuz-Kapsel der 3 soll am Montagabend an der ISS andocken. Das Menü steht dann am Donnerstag, dem russischen Kosmonautentag, auf dem Speiseplan. Gewaltige Eruption. Sehr viel heftiger als erwartet ist der Vulkan Piton de la Fournaise auf der französischen Südseeinsel Réunion ausgebrochen. Sogar einer der beiden Hauptgipfel stürzte ein. Magma wurde 200 Meter hoch geschleudert. Gewaltige Lavaströme, die sich bis zum Meer wälzten, versetzten die Bevölkerung in Angst. Mittlerweile hat sich die Lage stabilisiert. Menschen wurden nicht verletzt.
Der ISS soll heute die internationale Raumstation erreichen. Das Andocken ihres russischen Soyuz-Raumschiffs ist für 21:12 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Sommerzeit geplant. Mit an Bord der Soyuz ist als mittlerweile 5. Weltraumtourist der amerikanische Softwareunternehmer Charles Simonyi. Er ist für einen Kurzzeitaufenthalt Gast an Bord der ISS und hat dafür geschätzte 19 Millionen Euro bezahlt.
Ein unglaublich beliebtes Osterausflugsziel ist natürlich der Berliner Zoo in diesen Tagen. 20.000 Menschen wollten über das Wochenende allerdings nur einen sehen, Eisbär Knut. Viele reisten extra mit Reisebussen an und auch Touristen aus den USA und Japan ließen sich den inzwischen gut 13 Kilo schweren Kerl nicht entgehen. Um den Besucherstrom zu steuern, müssen inzwischen schon Sicherheitskräfte ran.
Kalt, noch kälter, wärmer. Besonders lange hat es heute Morgen nicht gedauert, bis Knut sein Osternest gefunden hat. Schon nach ein paar Minuten sind Ball- und Stoffhase erschnuppert. Kurzer Beißtest, das Geschenk von seinem Pfleger kommt an. Wie immer, wenn der kleine Eisbär durchs Gehege tollt, kommen die Menschen in Massen. Die Knut-Fangemeinde ist längst international. Knut ist umwerfend, findet dieser Mann aus Kanada. Wir sind zu Besuch in der Stadt und da wollten wir den Kindern natürlich Knut und den Zoo zeigen. Wir sind extra aus Toulouse angereist, um Knut zu sehen, erzählt diese Französin.
Sehr schön, sehr süß, niedlich.
Mittlerweile hat Klein Knut 17 Bodyguards und die sorgen dafür, dass ihm seine Fans nicht zu sehr aufs Fell rücken. In Gruppen von 300 Personen werden sie am Bärengehege vorbeigeschleust. Dann kommen die nächsten. 2-mal pro Tag geht das so, jeweils eine Stunde.
Normalerweise müssten wir da ein bisschen länger stehen, aber die anderen wollen ja auch drankommen.
Extra für den Feiertagsansturm wurde das Rotationskonzept entwickelt.
Es ist ganz klar, dass wir bei allen Aktionen in erster Linie an die Gesundheit unseres Tieres denken. Knut ist ein kleiner Bär und auch ein Kleinkind soll man nicht andauernd stören. Er hat also seinen Bereich hinter den Kulissen, der wirklich Sperrgebiet ist.
Und der Bereich ist für seine Fans absolut tabu. Diesem Mann ist das Knutfieber jedoch so zu Kopf gestiegen, dass er sogar seine Gesundheit riskiert, nur um einen Blick hinter die Kulissen zu erhaschen.
Von Gründonnerstag bis heute haben sich nach Schätzungen des Berliner Zoos knapp 100.000 Bärenfans vor dem Gehege gedrängelt, fast 20.000 pro Tag. Wie viel Geduld die Besucher aufbringen mussten, bis sie einen kurzen Blick auf Knut erhaschen durften, kann Ihnen Lars Wagner aus eigener leidvoller Erfahrung erzählen. Er hat sich heute in die Schlange eingereiht.
Wegen ihm platzt der Berliner Zoo aus allen Nähten. Tausende wollen zu Knut. Auch ich will es heute versuchen. Um 13:53 Uhr bin ich hier am Kassenhäuschen vor dem Zoo-Eingang. 10 Meter lang ist die Schlange, 11 Euro, die erste Hürde ist schnell genommen. Eine Familie mit 3 Kindern zahlt 29, nicht ganz billig, die Knut-Show. Wenige Schritte noch und ich bin zumindest in der Nähe des Eisbärgeheges. Kurz vor 2 ist es jetzt und über 200 Meter trennen mich jetzt noch von Knut. So lang ist die Schlange hier vor dem Bärengehege. Aber um ein allzu großes Gedränge zu verhindern, werden immer nur 300 Personen gleichzeitig eingelassen. Das heißt, bis ich Knut endlich zu Gesicht bekomme, muss ich mich weiter gedulden. Vorwärts geht es nur in Trippelschritten, doch keiner motzt oder drängelt. Die Stimmung ist friedlich, die Freude auf Knut groß. Dann ist es endlich soweit. Die nächsten 300 Besucher laufen los, ich mittendrin. Nur wer jetzt schnell ist, bekommt einen Platz vorne am Gitter. Eine knappe Stunde hat es nun gedauert, bis ich hier am Geländer stehe und rund 15 Meter entfernt von Knut bin. Der Blick ist hier ganz gut, auch das Mädel neben mir hat sich einen guten Platz erkämpft. Und das hat sich gelohnt, auch wenn du Knut nur ganz kurz sehen kannst.
Ja, hat sich gelohnt. Wir haben ein paar Fotos gemacht.
Also Erinnerungen dabei. Wir nützen die Zeit, bis der nächste Schwung kommt und wir hier wieder vom Geländer weg müssen. Jede Bewegung, jeder Dreher oder Zwischenspurt vom Babybären wird jetzt noch mitgenommen. Fotos geschossen, was die Speicherkarte hergibt. Denn schon sind die nächsten Knut-Fans im Anmarsch. 14:53 Uhr, so schnell können 8 Minuten vorüber sein. Über Lautsprecher werden wir aufgefordert, die Logenplätze für die Knut-Show wieder freizugeben. 52 Minuten, bis ich den ersten Blick auf Knut werfen konnte. Mein persönliches Fazit, es hat sich gelohnt.
As you can hear, the Russian Flight Control Team calling out range and rate of closure being relayed from Soyuz Commander Oleg Kotov. Currently, the Russian flight control team here in Korolyov, led by Russian flight director Nikolai Budarin, working with their U.S. counterparts a half a world away at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. Tonight's flight director on console at the Johnson Space Center in the International Space Station Flight Control Room is Flight Director Annette Hasbrook. She is joined on console by spacecraft communicator Lucia McCullough, who is seated in the yellow on the left of your screen, Hasbrook on the right side of your screen, wearing the red jacket. They will be working again in concert, looking over the shoulders of their Russian counterparts here in Korolyov as the Soyuz navigates its way to a docking directly to the Earth-facing port of the Zarya module of the International Space Station, the first component that was launched back on November 20th, 1998, to begin the assembly of the International Space Station.
Parameters are nominal.
The Soyuz is only about 1,000 meters away from its docking to the International Space Station, closing at a rate of less than 5 meters per second. You can see the current configuration of the International Space Station. You saw that a moment ago. Now you're seeing a view from the television camera on the Soyuz TMA-10 as it closes in for a docking to the International Space Station. This view is being relayed through the U.S. Ku-band communication system and fed back for Russian flight controllers here in Korolyov so they can have insight into the range and rate of closure of the Soyuz to the International Space Station's Zarya module. This view from the starboard one or S1 outboard camera as it looks over the Progress 24 cargo craft that is docked to the Piers docking compartment, showing the Soyuz TMA-10 as it closes to within less than 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer of the International Space Station, soon to begin a fly-around that will precisely align the Soyuz TMA-10 to the Zarya module, where several minutes of station keeping will be initiated to allow the Russian flight control team here in Korolyov to assess the precise alignment of the docking probe of the Soyuz TMA-10 with the Zarya module's docking port. Again, the docking is scheduled at 11:12 p.m. Moscow time, 2:12 p.m. Central time, as the two craft pass over the Ukraine, southeast of the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. The Soyuz that bears the call sign of Pulsar, selected by Soyuz commander Oleg Kotov, is closing in for its link up to the Zarya module. At the aft port of the Zvezda service module is the Soyuz TMA-9 that was repositioned from Zarya to Zvezda back on March 29th by the Expedition 14 crew. On board the International Space Station, Expedition 14 Commander Mike Lopez Alegria and Flight Engineer Mikhail Turin are monitoring the arrival of the new residents of the International Space Station, with whom they will begin an 11-day handover to literally hand them the reins of station control at the time that Lopez Alegria and Turin are ready to depart the International Space Station on April 20th for their landing in the TMA-9 in the central steppe of Kazakhstan to wrap up 214 days in space. Today marks the 203rd day in space for Mike Lopez Alegria and Mikhail Turin, their 201st day on board the International Space Station. Sonny Williams, the other Expedition 14 flight engineer who arrived on board the space station courtesy of the shuttle Discovery on the STS-116 mission back in December, will later tonight become part of the Expedition 15 crew as she works with Turin and Kotov to move her custom-made Soyuz seedliner from the Soyuz TMA-9, where it currently resides, over to the new Soyuz TMA-10. In turn, U.S. spaceflight participant Charles Simonyi's Soyuz seedliner will be moved over to the older TMA-9. That is his ticket home on April 20th, along with Mike Lopez Alegria and Mikhail Turin.
Copy.
Once again, this view from cameras on the International Space Station's S1 or Starboard 1 truss, showing the approach of the TMA-10 under the controls of Oleg Kotov, who is seated in the center seat of the Soyuz's descent module, the middle section of the three-module Soyuz vehicle. To his left, seated in the left seat as he was for launch 2 days ago, is Station Commander Fyodor Yurchikhin. Charles Simonyi, the U.S. spaceflight participant, flying under a commercial agreement with the Russian Federal Space Agency, seated in the right seat tonight. In the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, visiting vehicle officer Tremaine Days reporting back to Flight Director Annette Hasbrook that the Soyuz fly-around has begun. This essentially enables Kotov to fly from the vicinity of the aft end of the Zvezda service module to reposition the Soyuz in direct alignment about 100 meters away from the Earth-facing docking port of the Zarya module, where about 6 minutes of station keeping will be initiated. All of this under the pre-programmed computer commands that are loaded in to the Soyuz's computers.
And we can fly around in pitch.
Once the docking occurs a short time from now, hooks and latches will be initiated to close around one another to form a hard mate between Soyuz and Zarya, after which about 90 minutes of leak checks will be initiated on both sides of the docking interface as the Expedition 14 and 15 crews, the 15 crew on the Soyuz, the 14 crew within Zarya, ensure that we have a tight seal between the two vehicles before the hatches are open. The hatch opening to allow the two crews to greet one another for the first time is expected at around 12:55 a.m. Moscow time, 3:55 p.m. Central Time on Monday.
Fly around. Copy.
The flashing beacon on the Soyuz TMA-10 is part of the Corps' automated rendezvous system, essentially a series of radio beacons that communicates navigational data to a comparable system on the Zarya module of the International Space Station, providing Kotov with the exact range to docking and his rate of closure, currently about 279 meters separating Soyuz and the station, closing at a rate now of about 0.8 of a meter per second. At the time of contact and capture, Soyuz will be closing in on Zarya at a rate of about 0.1 of a meter per second.
And we're continuing to work for status quo.
The Soyuz and the International Space Station are in contact with one another as Oleg Kotov, the Soyuz commander, reports his progress during the fly-around to Expedition 14 flight engineer Mikhail Turin.
230 range, 0.5 range rate, and we're continuing with the pitch fly-around. Lighting conditions are good. Copy. All parameters on EPA are nominal. No anomalies. Copy.
Again, this view from the television camera on the exterior of the Soyuz TMA-10 that provides range and engineering data back to the Russian flight control team here at the Russian Mission Control Center outside Moscow. Again, tonight's Russian Flight Directorate team led by Nikolai Budarin, who was a member of the Expedition 6 crew back in 2003. Again, two other Russian vehicles currently at the International Space Station at the aft port of the Zvezda service module, the Soyuz TMA-9, that will bring Mike Lopez Alegria, Mikhail Turin, and Charles Simonyi home on April 20th, and dock to the Piers docking compartment, the International Space Station's Progress 24 cargo craft.
Romeo 7 doesn't work. We have wide angle selected. Copy.
A good view of the International Space Station from the Soyuz TMA-10. The Soyuz now just 200 meters away from its final destination at the Zarya module's Earth-facing docking port. Soyuz is now beginning a roll maneuver that will put it at the correct orientation for several minutes of station keeping to enable Russian flight controllers to conduct one more check of the Soyuz systems before the automated pre-programmed commanding and the Soyuz computers initiates final approach. Soyuz now just 190 meters away, closing at a rate of 0.3 of a meter per second, right on course for an on-time docking.
Roll maneuver.
And the visiting vehicle officer now reports station keeping has begun right on time. This will be about 6 minutes, unless the Russian flight controllers decide to initiate an earlier approach. Right now, everything going on time, on track for Yurchikhin, Kotov, and Charles Simonyi. For Yurchikhin and Kotov, they will begin 6 months on the International Space Station. Simonyi begins 11 days under his commercial agreement with Roscosmos, the Russian Federal Space Agency.
Let's switch back to narrow angle, please. Copy narrow angle. Range is 168, and we're almost in station keeping at this time.
About 12 minutes away from the expected docking of Soyuz TMA-10 to the International Space Station as the two craft pass over Western Europe right now. Again, the docking expected to take place while the two spacecraft are over the Ukraine. The Corps' automated rendezvous system taking the Soyuz to its precise alignment with the Earth-facing port of the Zarya module of the International Space Station.
We have a lock on. And we're watching.
Oleg Kotov, the 41-year-old Russian Air Force colonel and medical doctor at the controls of the Soyuz, Fyodor Yurchikhin, returning to the International Space Station for the first time since he was a member of Atlantis' crew on the STS-112 mission in 2002 that delivered the Starboard 1 thrust segment.
Approach or final approach. Message is eliminated, and we will initiate final approach on our go. We copy on your go. 31 0000713 has been entered, or has been typed, but we will execute on your go. Copy.
You can clearly see the jet thruster firings maintaining a station-keeping position for Soyuz. Kotov about to receive the go to enter the initiated command that will start final approach.
We're watching the docking interface. Go ahead and
About an hour and a half ago, all of the solar arrays on the station, the one remaining deployed array on the P6 solar array truss structure, plus the solar arrays on both Zarya and Zvezda, were feathered or placed on an edge-on position relative to the approach path of Soyuz to prevent any inadvertent jet thruster pluming of the arrays, which are very delicate. Those arrays will resume their normal orientation after the docking is achieved.
Mode 30. Yes, we have 33, 000, 17, 13, 70, 13. And we're watching the velocity increasing. You should see the large diameter filling up 2 squares on your periscope.
Final approach now initiated. Soyuz just over 100 meters away from its target, closing at a rate of 0.7 of a meter per second. Everything going very well according to Russian flight controllers here in Korolyov.
The docking interface and a half of piers. We have a little bit of motion. We can't hear you. The final approach is stable. We have just small oscillations to the degree of about half to 1 degree. Copy.
Just 78 meters now separating Soyuz from the International Space Station. The rate of closure dropping ever so slightly, now 0.4 of a meter per second. Kotov is aligning the docking probe of the Soyuz to the Earth-facing docking port of the Zarya module. Zarya launched back in 1998 as the first element that provided the initial control capability for the early segments of the station during the initial phase of assembly.
Measurement device data, the range is 67 and 38 centimeters range rate, and we're watching the docking interface and the center. Copy. Would you like to turn off the light filter at this time? It's up to you, really, whatever's more convenient. Go ahead and turn it off if others do. Range 52 meters. Range rate 26. We're watching.
At Mission Control in Houston, the visiting vehicle officer, Tremaine Days, reporting to Annette Hasbrook, the flight director, that we are now just 50 meters away from docking. Everything proceeding on track. Good rate of closure by Kotov. You will see the crosshairs match up with the docking target of the Zarya module. You can see that empty docking port just about in the lower right-hand corner of the left quadrant of this engineering view from the external television camera of the Soyuz.
We have SSVP power up. Correct, we confirm. SSVP ready.
The core's antenna has now retracted right on schedule. Good retraction reported by the visiting vehicle officer. It was visually confirmed as well.
Would you say again, please? And what is the status of the message? The antenna is retracted. SSVP status nominal and ready. The crosshairs are aligned. 20 centimeters closing rate. About 1.5 degree to the right and about half a degree upward is where the target is. Docking interface matches the two squares, which corresponds to the measuring device data. We have just some deviation of the target relative to the center line, so about half of a degree to the left, and it's all in yaw. Copy. No issues with course. Sunset.
Soyuz and the International Space Station passing into an orbital sunset over Central Europe. About 4 minutes to go until contact and capture. Everything continuing to go smoothly for Oleg Kotov, the first-time flyer at the controls of Soyuz TM-810.
20. Not seeing the target. The target is becoming
20 meters separating Soyuz from the Zarya docking port. Kotov closing at 1/10 of a meter per second.
It's a little upward, about a degree. We have air base eliminated. Copy. The target is going to move down about 2 degrees now. The crosshairs are becoming to get misaligned. The range now is about 20 meters. 0.2 for closing rate. Going back to the center of Veska. Copy.
Soyuz putting the final touches on what so far has been a perfect rendezvous for docking to 17 meters separating Kotov, Yurchikhin, and Simonyi from the International Space Station.
0.2 range rate. The crosshairs are aligned to about half of the thickness, and the target is a bit to the right. Copy. Two degrees to the right now. And it keeps getting more offset, now about 3 degrees to the right.
Now Soyuz is just 10 meters away, closing at a rate of 1/10 of a meter per second.
Closing at 0.18.
Flight directors here in Korolyov and other controllers standing by for contact and capture of the International Space Station.
Standing by for contact. Watching shadowing from the... We have
contact and capture, docking confirmed at 11:10 p.m. Moscow time, 2:10 p.m. Central Time. Docking confirmed, a perfect arrival for new residents to the International Space Station and an American businessman. The docking occurring over central Ukraine. Again, docking occurring at 2:10 p.m. Central Time, 11:10 p.m. Moscow time.
How copy?
Soyuz TM-810 has arrived at the International Space Station.
Say again. Yeah, go ahead.
The International Space Station is in free drift. All other thrusters disabled to enable the relative motion between the two vehicles to dampen out against one another prior to the initiation of the hooks and latches engaging one another to form a hard mate between the two craft. The docking probe beginning its retraction. A smooth arrival for new residents to the International Space Station, Yurchikhin and Kotov, beginning a half year at the complex. For Charles Simonyi, 11 days on the International Space Station. Simonyi on the left, Kotov on the center, Yurchikhin on the right. Yurchikhin will take over command of the International Space Station as he and Kotov join Sonny Williams, who later tonight will become part of the Expedition 15 crew.
Copy. Go ahead and perform steps on page 83, perform leak check of all of the compartments, and verify hard mate of process and work. After all the measurements are taken, taking first measurement, 775 and BOA, 846, and the propulsion
With docking having been successfully completed just about 4 minutes ago.
Work with the TV.
We are standing by for confirmation of hooks and latches having engaged one another. The docking probe retraction underway. Oleg Kotov flying Soyuz, which was under the automated pre-programmed commanding of onboard computer activity as the Soyuz completed a smooth arrival to the International Space Station.
Millimeters is the distance that the probe has traveled. Copy. And we have completed TV system reconfig. And we're monitoring the parameters at this time and monitoring. Whoa.
Good day and welcome back to the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow, where, as you can see, the hatch has just swung open between the Soyuz TMA-10 and the International Space Station, with leak checks having proceeded ahead of schedule following the docking of the Soyuz to the Zarya module's Earth-facing port at 2:10 p.m. Central Time, 11:10 p.m. Moscow time. You're looking down into the Soyuz TMA-10, and you're looking at Charles Simonyi, the 58-year-old U.S. businessman who is about to float into the International Space Station to begin 11 days into the complex. First on board, Soyuz commander and flight engineer Oleg Kotov, as he embraces flight engineer Sonny Williams, Mike Lopez Alegria, and Mikhail Turin. Kotov was at the controls of the Soyuz during its automated approach and docking to the Zarya module just a little over an hour ago. Kotov floating onto his new orbital home for the next half year.
Combined power 23, 31, 15.
The crew again a bit ahead of schedule in opening the hatches and greeting one another.
The next command.
Leak checks that were performed over the course of the last orbit between the actual docking of the Soyuz to the Zarya module's Earth-facing port went very well, no issues. Once a hard mate was established just a few minutes after the contact and capture between the two vehicles, enabling hooks and latches to engage one another.
Power supply system auto mode is deactivated.
Charles Simonyi, the 58-year-old U.S. businessman, former Microsoft executive and software developer, now on board the International Space Station to begin 11 days of Earth photography work, experiments, ham radio contacts under a commercial agreement he signed to fly in space with the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos. Fyodor Yurchikhin, the Expedition 15 commander, now on board the International Space Station as well. Again, hatches opened slightly ahead of schedule. The hatches were open at 3:30 p.m. Central Time, 12:30 a.m. Moscow time, about 1 hour and 20 minutes after the actual docking of the Soyuz to the International Space Station. The crew, the 6 crew members now will make their way into the Zvezda service module, as is customary, to take congratulatory calls from the U.S. and Russian dignitaries and friends of Charles Simonyi, who are gathered here at the Russian Mission Control Center outside of Moscow.
We are in very high spirits. Feel great. This is our new home, and we are already beginning to like it. Oh well. You have more time to get used to it. Hello, the State Committee. All of us personally congratulate you on such a wonderful, successful, and professional docking. We didn't count on anything less. What can I say? Well, have successful handover between the crews, prepare for the landing. We are expecting some of you here on the ground, and to the rest of you guys, most successful flight and completion of the entire flight plan. And we're always with you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for kind words and congratulations. We'll try to make sure we will not let you down. Now, this is the Scientific and Research Institute's Nemash. Our warmest congratulations to the entire crew, to both crews, Oleg, Charles, Fyodor, Michael, Misha, Sunita. We wish you most successful flight, and we hope that our next participant of the space flight will have most wonderful and interesting 13 days on board the station, and happy landing. Thank you very much from all our crew. I do believe that the Expedition 14 crew can't wait to land and get back, and we're very happy to arrive here. Oleg, Charles, Fyodor, I'm so impressed by the start, by your launch, and I wish you the most successful work on board the station, and we know that you are a real great international space team, and now Charles, our friend, is the member of that team. You guys, you will do your best, no doubts. And yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the very high assessment of our international team. And everybody who knew us, who saw us working together, really emphasized that we are a real team. Michael Baker,
this is Michael
I
Baker.
wish you the utmost success.
Success in your mission on behalf of NASA. Fyodor, it's good to see you. You look good. Oleg, you look great too. And Charles, welcome to space, all of you. Michael, Misha, and Sunita, we look forward to seeing you soon. And Sunita, we're still working on your ride home. You'll get to set another record, right?
No. She likes to be here.
Okay.
Yeah, and we see in your T-shirts MKS 14, MKS 15. I ask her, what about MKS 16?
Charles, weightlessness becomes you. Did you hear me, Charles?
Yes, Susie, I could hear you loud and clear.
Well, you three look terrific. You look totally in control, and we're so anxious to read your blogs and hear everything about the first 2 days of spaceflight.
Yes, I made about 3 or 4 pages, handwritten pages of notes, and I'm just very anxious to transcribe them. And I wrote down practically every moment, every interesting moment of the flight.
Okay, well, we send you Godspeed from all your friends and family and all the people around the world who are cheering you on.
Thank you so much. How was the launch, by the way?
The launch was beautiful, Charles. This is Martha.
Hi, Martha.
I want to thank your 2 captains for such a safe and beautiful trip. And I just want you to know that we all think that you are intrepid, a pioneer, and above all, guess what? You're out of this world.
Martha, it's really an honor to be here at this outpost. And
hello, everyone. This is
Всем привет, это Лариса Юрчихина. Феденька, милый мой, я тебя люблю.
Guess what? He missed it. I will repeat it. But everybody else heard it. And, sweetheart, I love you too. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You're my hope. I love you very much. You're the bravest, the most beautiful girl on earth. Please don't make me cry. I love you too. And here is Sveta. Hi, Alec. Hi. I'm very, very happy for you. Everything went just great, very successful, and I'm glad that everything went nominal. We love you very much, and we're already expecting you back. Yes, my love and my kisses to all of you, too.
Hi there, is Charles available? Is he sleeping? Hi Charles, can you hear me? It's your brother Tomasz.
He's looking something.
Oh. Hi there Charles, yes? Én vagyok. Itt 27 éve nem volt már magyar kommunikáció az űrből. It's since 27 years there was no communication in Hungarian language.
Mondd még egyszer ezt magyarul.
27 éve nem volt magyarul kommunikáció az űrből, úgyhogy ezúton is köszöntelek téged.
Nagyon szépen köszönöm én is köszöntelek, és a Farkas Perci ott van?
Itt van, igen, itt van mögöttem, úgyhogy adom akkor egy pillanatra őt is. Szia, és örülök, hogy jól vagy.
Köszönöm szépen.
Drága barátom, itt vagyok, és nagyon tiszta szívből köszöntelek magyar nyelven. Öröm számomra hallani a hangodat, vigyázzatok magatokra. Всего самого хорошего вам, дорогие друзья.
Thanks a lot, dear friend. This is Bertalan Farkas, the first Hungarian in space. Szia, Berci, köszönöm szépen mindent, amit csináltál, a tanítást, az összes élményeket, amit leírtál. Nagyon értékes volt. Köszönöm szépen.
Der US-Milliardär Charles Simonyi ist in der Nacht auf der ISS angekommen. Er ist der 5. Weltraumtourist auf der Station. Der 58-jährige Softwareunternehmer dockte nach 2 Tagen Flug sicher an. Mit ihm kamen 2 Kosmonauten, die ihre Kollegen auf der Raumstation ablösen. Simonyi hat für sein Weltraumabenteuer rund 16 Millionen Euro gezahlt.
ISS angekommen. Vergangene Nacht dockte die Sojus-Kapsel mit dem 58-jährigen Milliardär und 2 russischen Kosmonauten an Bord in der ISS an. Simonyi hat für die knapp 2-wöchige Reise 25 Millionen Dollar bezahlt, also knapp 20 Millionen Euro. Seine Mitastronauten an Bord der Raumstation dürften sich über den Besuch freuen. Immerhin hat er, hier ganz rechts im Bild, Wachteln und kandierte Früchte für ein Gala-Diner mitgebracht.
Eine russische Soyuz-Kapsel hat 2 Kosmonauten und einen amerikanischen Weltraumtouristen zur internationalen Raumstation gebracht, den Milliardär Charles Simonyi. Der Softwareunternehmer, rechts im Bild, ist der 5. Gast auf der ISS. Für Transport und 10 Tage Aufenthalt muss er fast 20 Millionen Euro bezahlen.
Kaum ein Mensch hat bisher einen Koboldhai lebend gesehen. Jetzt war er immerhin 2 Wochen lang zu bestaunen. Fischer hatten ihn aus 300 Metern Tiefe gezogen, danach kam er sofort in eine Druckkammer. Das Sea Life Aquarium in Tokio ist stolz darauf, den Koboldhai so lange am Leben erhalten zu haben. Nun starb er, als man ihn in ein normales Becken umsiedeln wollte. Was wir nach 2 Wochen mit ziemlicher Sicherheit sagen können, ein solcher Druckbehälter verlängert das Leben von Tiefseefischen. Erst Ende Januar hatten japanische Taucher eine seltene Urzeitkreatur lebend entdeckt. Eine echte Sensation. Dieser Kragenhai war aus eigener Kraft an die Wasseroberfläche gekommen, überlebte aber die geringen Druckverhältnisse nicht. Noch rätseln die Wissenschaftler über das Leben der Tiefseekreaturen. Immer öfter werden sie als Beifang per Schleppnetz heraufgeholt. Doch erforscht ist das Leben in der ewigen Dunkelheit kaum. Der deutsche Naturforscher Jürgen Kriewet begutachtete in Tokio den seltenen Koboldhai.
Wie sich Tiere an solcher extremen Lebensbedingungen, wo es ja immer dunkel ist, wo enorme Drucke herrschen, wo es schwierig ist, Nahrung zu finden und auch einen Sexualpartner zu finden, sich an sowas anzupassen, das sind natürlich Mechanismen, die sehr interessant sind, die sehr wichtig sind.
Wissenschaftler aus aller Welt werten nun die gesammelten Erkenntnisse über den Koboldhai aus und hoffen, das nächste Exemplar länger am Leben erhalten zu können.
Ich wünsche Ihnen einen schönen guten Abend. Jetzt kommt der Frühling mächtig in die Gänge von Nord bis Süd, von West bis Ost. In Binz an der Ostsee bremst nur die 10 Grad kühle See etwas die Temperaturen, daher hier 14 Grad. In München waren es schon fast 20 bei strahlend blauem Himmel. Und auch in Dresden schien ab Mittag die Sonne bei 16 Grad. Das Dauerhoch bei den britischen Inseln schleicht sich jetzt heran und bleibt. Über der iberischen Halbinsel bis ins westliche Mittelmeer hingegen halten sich hartnäckig die Wolken dieses Tiefs. Hier gibt es dann also Schauer und Gewitter bis nach Südfrankreich, während weite Teile Europas freundliches Wetter bekommen und die Schauer werden nach Skandinavien abgedrängt. Mit Werten um die 24 Grad liegen wir morgen dann auch an der europäischen Spitze. Die kommende Nacht wird meist sternklar und nicht mehr so kalt. Im Süden, Südwesten und auch im Nordwesten bilden sich aber wieder Dunst- oder Nebelfelder. Die werden aber dann schnell von der Sonne aufgelöst und dann kommen nur vereinzelte Schleierwolken hinzu. Und so ergeben sich je nach Nebel- und Wolkenverteilung zwischen 12 und 13 Sonnenstunden. Und da sollte man die Sonnencreme rausholen. Temperaturen an der See 14 Grad, sonst bis zu 25 entlang des Rheins. Und dann wird's hochsommerlich. Bei Sonne pur gibt's nämlich bis zu 28 Grad im Süden und Westen. Und ob wir damit jetzt nahtlos in den Sommer übergehen, das verrate ich Ihnen morgen.
Ist mit viel Getöse wieder ausgebrochen. Aus einem Krater schleuderte er Feuerfontänen hoch in die Luft. 5 Stunden dauerte das Naturschauspiel diesmal. Menschen oder Gebäude waren nicht in Gefahr. Bereits Ende März war der Ätna kurzzeitig aktiv gewesen.
Ein Bundeswehrtornado ist über der Schweiz im Berner Oberland abgestürzt. Retter haben einen der Piloten verletzt geborgen. Mehr von Claudia Rödel und Daniel Franz.
Hier im Berner Oberland ist der Tornado an eine Felswand geprallt, wahrscheinlich an die Ebnifluh, ein rund 3300 Meter hoher Berg im Lauterbrunnental. Augen berichten, das Flugzeug sei extrem tief unterwegs gewesen.
Das Flugzeug ist sehr tief geflogen, das war die große Überraschung für mich. Meine Frau und ich waren etwa auf 1150 Meter an einem Spaziergang und das Flugzeug kam kaum 100 oder 200 Meter höher geflogen durch das Lauterbrunnental und erst kurz bevor dass er einfach vor diese Berge hinkam, hat er stark aufgezogen und hat feststellen müssen, dass er wahrscheinlich über diese Berge nicht rüberkommt.
Kurz zuvor war der Jet noch in der Nähe von Luzern zum Auftanken zwischengelandet. Nach Angaben der Schweizer Luftwaffe war der Tornado auf dem Rückweg eines Übungsflugs von Korsika. Der Pilot konnte mit Seilen von einem Hubschrauber aus nach dem Unglück gerettet werden und ist leicht verletzt. Ein zweites Besatzungsmitglied wird noch vermisst. Die beiden Bundeswehrsoldaten waren auf einem sogenannten Navigationsflug unterwegs. Dabei muss der Pilot zur Übung verschiedene Ziele anfliegen.
Das Verteidigungsministerium hat bislang nur bestätigt, dass am Nachmittag über der Schweiz ein Kampfjet der Bundeswehr abgestürzt ist. Um welchen Typ es sich dabei handelt oder ob der Pilot bei dem Absturz ums Leben gekommen ist, darüber wollte das Ministerium nicht sprechen. Da es sich bei dem Flug jedoch um einen Übungsflug handelte, um einen Navigationsflug, ist zu vermuten, dass der Pilot noch relativ jung war und sich noch in der Ausbildung befand.
Informationen von Daniel Franz, und soeben meldet die Schweizer Kantonspolizei, dass der zweite Pilot nur noch tot geborgen werden konnte.
Weit verstreut liegen die Trümmerteile auf dem Gletscher. Es war 15:15 Uhr, als der Tornado der Bundeswehr im Berner Oberland gegen eine Felswand prallte. Aus Südfrankreich kommend hatte das Flugzeug kurz zuvor noch auf dem Schweizer Flugplatz Emmen aufgetankt. Von da aus ging es weiter durch das Lauterbrunnental. Laut Augenzeugenberichten in sehr geringer Höhe. Dort kam es dann zu dem Unglück.
Die Explosion war riesengroß und es gab sicher 300-400 Meter im Durchmesser eine Riesenstichflamme. Und eine kleine Lawine ist dann mit den Teilen abgegangen.
Ein Zusammenhang mit dem Tornado-Einsatz der Bundeswehr in Afghanistan besteht nicht. Nach Medienberichten gehörte die Maschine dem im bayerischen Lager Lechfeld stationierten Jagdbombergeschwader 32 an. An Bord befand sich keine Munition. Andernfalls hätte die Schweiz den Überflug nicht genehmigt.
Die Bewegung, die unser Amt in Absprache mit der Luftwaffe ausstellte, beinhaltete eine Landung in Emmen und dann den Weiterflug nach Deutschland. Integriert in diesen Flug waren auch Trainingselemente, die der Tornado abwickeln wollte.
Es ist der 40. Absturz eines Tornados seit ihrem ersten Einsatz im Jahr 1981. Insgesamt verfügt die Luftwaffe über 180 Maschinen dieses Typs. Am Morgen wird ein Expertenteam der Bundeswehr in die Schweiz reisen, um die Hintergründe des Absturzes zu klären.
Der Kampfjet aus dem bayerischen Lager Lechfeld war aus bislang unbekannter Ursache an einer Felswand zerschellt. Einer der beiden Piloten starb, der zweite wurde schwer verletzt geborgen. Augenzeugen berichten, dass die Besatzung kurz vor dem Aufprall noch vergeblich versucht hat, den Tornado im Steilflug über den Gipfel zu ziehen.
Fragender Gipfel versperrte ihnen den Weg. Um 15:15 Uhr zerschellte der Tornado an einer Felswand.
Ich habe mitverfolgt, wie er immer steiler gestiegen ist und gegen eine Wand geflogen ist, circa 80 bis 100 Meter knapp unter dem Gipfel. Die Explosion war riesengroß und es gab sicher 300-400 Meter im Durchmesser eine Riesenstichflamme. Und eine kleine Lawine ist dann mit den Teilen abgegangen.
Die beiden Piloten konnten sich gerade noch rechtzeitig mit dem Schleudersitz aus dem Jet katapultieren. Der 27-jährige Pilot hatte trotzdem keine Chance. Sein 34-jähriger Waffensystemoffizier hatte mehr Glück. Sein Fallschirm verfing sich an einer Felsnase. Er wurde per Seilwinde von einem Rettungshubschrauber geborgen. Ein komplizierter Einsatz.
Das ist Hochgebirge, also sehr massives Hochgebirge. Und wir hatten eine Föhnlage, also wir hatten eine Föhnwalze auf der anderen Seite und der Helikopter war etwas unruhig. Zudem hatten wir Eis- und Steinschlag in diesem Gebiet. Oben auf dem Gratis sind große Schneewächten, die abbrechen könnten, dann die Wand runterdonnern könnte. Und zudem war der Pilot am Fallschirm hängend in dieser Felswand drin.
Das Trümmerfeld unterhalb der Einschlagstelle wurde weiträumig abgesperrt.
Wand sich sozusagen aufgetan hat vor den Piloten, da war es einfach zu spät. Man könnte jetzt spekulieren, der Pilot hat zu spät gemerkt, welche Wand da vor ihm ist und hat versucht, die Maschine noch hochzureißen. Das offenbar nicht mehr geschafft. Man hat es vielleicht noch rechtzeitig gesehen, dass man den Ausstieg eingeleitet hat, aber eben für den Piloten war es dann zu spät.
Besten Dank, Holger, für diese Einschätzungen aus Berlin. Holger Schmidt.
US-Astronautin Suni Williams lief als erster Mensch der Welt den Boston-Marathon auf dem Laufband im Weltall. Zeitgleich und offiziell gegen 21.000 Läufer auf Mutter Erde. Während die Athleten unten gegen Regen kämpften, hatte die 41-Jährige in der Raumstation ISS warme 23,6 Grad. Am Ende war sie zwar mit 4 Stunden und 24 Minuten 2 Stunden langsamer als die russische Siegerin Grigorjewa, hatte dafür aber während des Marathons mit der ISS zweimal die Erde umkreist.
In the USA and Wolf Blitzer for more extensive coverage in just a few moments. But once again, the gunman and the hostage are both dead at Johnson Space Center. Here's Wolf Blitzer.
At NASA's Johnson Space Center, a gunman kills a hostage and kills himself. This hour, details still emerging in Houston. Also tonight, the Virginia Tech gunman's family finally speaks out. Do they have any answers or words to ease the anguish? And new political crossfire over the Senate Majority Leader's claim the war in Iraq is lost. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Thomas Friedman tells us if he thinks Iraq is a lost cause. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Bureau. But up first tonight, the breaking news out of Houston. An armed standoff at Johnson Space Center ending in bloodshed. It's a chilling close to the week in which we saw America's worst shooting rampage ever. CNN's Kathleen Koch is joining us with the latest on this still unfolding drama. Kathleen?
Wolf, an apparent murder-suicide tonight at the NASA facility in Houston. Houston police say that 2 people are dead, a gunman and an apparent hostage. Another hostage, a woman whose arms and feet had been taped, has been freed and is being investigated or examined right now by paramedics. Now, police say that this all started just before 2 p.m. Central Time today when they got a call about shots fired at Building 44. That's the northernmost building on the NASA complex. Officers and the SWAT team arrived, surrounded the building. NASA employees had already been hustled out to safety.
Yeah, let me explain that. The report to us was that there were 2 shots, and that's what caused us to respond to this scene. And we're believing that one of the hostages, the male, who's deceased, was shot during that particular moment, because from that point forward, we only have the other shot that was heard by our SWAT team members, and we believe that to be the suspect shooting himself.
Police say the hostage was shot in the chest, the gunman once in the head. Their bodies right now are still on the 2nd floor of the building where the shootings occurred, while police await the arrival of homicide investigators and the FBI. Police say there was, in their opinion, right now only one weapon involved, a snub-nose revolver with a 2-inch barrel. Police say they could not yet identify the gunman, the hostages, or what the relationship, if any, between the 3 might be. Police also couldn't say whether or not the 2 hostages were NASA employees or contractors for the space agency. And police from the outset did try their best to establish communication with the shooter. They say they were unsuccessful, and they also said that they found no note at the scene. So, Wolf, right now the motive for this apparent murder-suicide remains mystery.
We'll watch this story. It underscores how jittery the nation is right now after that Virginia Tech massacre earlier in the week. Tonight
Keine Katastrophe ohne eine zweite. Nur wenige Tage nach dem Massaker von Blacksburg hat jetzt ein blutiges Geiseldrama die NASA erschüttert. Ein bewaffneter Mann hatte sich im Johnson Space Center in Houston mit einem Kollegen verbarrikadiert. Dann fielen Schüsse. Iris Theisen.
Hubschrauber über dem NASA-Gebäude. Auch aus der Luft soll jeder Winkel kontrolliert werden. Die Polizei hat das Johnson Space Center umstellt. Stundenlang versuchen die Einsatzkräfte mit dem Geiselnehmer zu verhandeln. Während wir mit ihm verhandelt haben, hörten wir einen Schuss. Wir glaubten, der Täter habe sich selbst erschossen, und dann haben wir beschlossen zu stürmen. Im Gebäude finden die Beamten 2 Leichen. Einen der Geiseln, einen Mann, tötete der Geiselnehmer wahrscheinlich in den ersten Minuten des Dramas. Sich selbst richtete er mit einer Kugel in den Kopf hin. Eine Frau wird unverletzt befreit. Der Täter hatte sie mit Klebeband an einen Stuhl gefesselt. In dem 2-geschossigen Haus ist ein Computerzentrum untergebracht. Während der Geiselnehmer sich im Gebäude 44 des Johnson Space Center der NASA verschanzt, werden die Mitarbeiter in Sicherheit gebracht. Der Geiselnehmer soll 50 bis 60 Jahre alt sein, möglicherweise ein Mitarbeiter der NASA. Noch ist unklar, wie er trotz der hohen Sicherheitsvorkehrungen eine Waffe auf das Gelände schmuggeln konnte.
4 Stunden lang versuchte die Polizei vergeblich mit ihm zu verhandeln. Als in dem Gebäude Schüsse fielen, drangen Sondereinheiten dort ein. Ein Mann und der Täter wurden tot aufgefunden. Die 2. Geisel, eine Frau, war gefesselt, aber unverletzt, sagt dieser Polizist. Der Geiselnehmer soll ein Angestellter eines NASA-Subunternehmens gewesen sein. Über seine Motive ist nichts bekannt. Die Familie des Amokläufers von Blacksburg hat inzwischen in einer schriftlichen Erklärung tiefes Bedauern für seine Taten ausgedrückt. Es sei eine schreckliche Tragödie, heißt es in dem an die Medien weitergeleiteten Schreiben.
Police agency complex in Texas. Armed with a gun, a man took 2 people hostage at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. Police say the gunman killed one of them and himself. Authorities say the shooter's motive is unclear. They have now confirmed that the gunman worked for Jacobs Engineering, a NASA contractor.
Auf dem Gelände des NASA-Kontrollzentrums in Houston im US-Bundesstaat Texas hat ein Weltraumingenieur einen Kollegen erschossen und sich anschließend selbst das Leben genommen. Eine Frau, die ebenfalls als Geisel genommen wurde, blieb unverletzt. Der Täter hatte seine Waffe vor etwa einem Monat in einem örtlichen Waffenhandel gekauft.
Gegen Mittag amerikanischer Ortszeit nimmt das Geiseldrama seinen Anfang. Der Täter betritt dieses Gebäude auf dem weitläufigen NASA-Gelände, fuchtelt mit einer Waffe umher und nimmt 2 Geiseln. Kurz darauf fallen mindestens 2 Schüsse. Anschließend verschanzt sich der Mann 3 Stunden lang in einem Büro. Die Polizei hat unterdessen das Gebäude komplett geräumt. Während der gesamten Zeit gelingt es den Beamten allerdings nicht, Kontakt zu dem Mann aufzunehmen. Erst als ein weiterer Schuss fällt, stürmen die Einsatzkräfte das Gebäude. Dort finden sie die getötete Geisel und den Täter, der sich mit einem Kopfschuss selbst gerichtet hat. Die Frau, die er in seiner Gewalt hatte, ist unverletzt. Die Identität des Mannes und auch sein Motiv sind noch nicht eindeutig geklärt. Offenbar handelt es sich bei dem Geiselnehmer aber um den Mitarbeiter einer Zulieferfirma der NASA. Er soll laut Polizeiangaben zwischen 50 und 60 Jahren alt sein.
Ended after a gunman who entered the building shot a hostage and then himself. It comes just 5 days after that killing spree at Virginia Tech University.
This is where the United States houses and trains its astronauts. But on Friday, some 15,000 workers were evacuated here after a gunman had entered the compound. The NASA contractor had locked himself inside a second-floor office of this block, known as Building 44. Police identified him as Bill Phillips, an engineer in his 50s or 60s. He took 2 hostages. Both were NASA employees. When the police sent in a SWAT team, they found 2 bodies at the scene, the gunman who'd shot himself and a male hostage.
There was some type of dispute between the suspect and the victim, and Fran, or the female that was involved in the situation, was also an employee in the general area, and she was taken hostage.
So how could an armed gunman have strolled through the gates of America's space agency just days after the Virginia Tech massacre? NASA says they were taken by surprise, despite better safeguards.
Earlier in the week, we in fact had reviewed, as a result of the Virginia Tech shootings, had reviewed our own procedures here at the Johnson Space Center, security procedures and response procedures and so forth.
This embarrassing breach of security also coincides with the 8th anniversary of the Columbine school shooting. But 8 years on, it seems that even America's high security installations are not impenetrable. Greg Mosbach, BBC News.
Name im NASA-Kontrollzentrum in Houston. Ein bewaffneter Weltraumingenieur erschoss eine männliche Geisel und dann sich selbst. Eine Frau, die ebenfalls in seiner Gewalt war, blieb unverletzt. Der 60-jährige Täter hatte sich stundenlang in einem Büro verschanzt. Laut Polizei hatte es Streit zwischen dem Täter und seinem Opfer gegeben.
Well, in the campus of Virginia Tech, victims' families and friends mark a day of solemn mourning and remembrance for the 32 victims of gunman Seung-Hui Cho. And from the people closest to the shooter, a statement of grief, sympathy and shame. His family released a letter on Friday from their self-imposed seclusion. Randy Kay reports.
The statement comes just days after Seung-Hui Cho's senseless slaying of his classmates and his own death. An apology stained with shame. We are so deeply sorry for the devastation my brother has caused. No words can express our sadness. We are heartbroken. We grieve alongside the families, the Virginia Tech community, our state of Virginia, and the rest of the nation and the world. It was released by Cho's sister, Sun Kyung Cho. Of the victims, she writes, each of these people had so much love, talent, and gifts to offer, and their lives were cut short. It is clear from her words, Cho's family is struggling too. We are humbled by this darkness. We feel hopeless, helpless, and lost. He has made the world weep. We are living a nightmare. Sung-Hui Cho lived here until he was 8, an apartment in a poor neighborhood of Seoul. Then the family moved to the U.S. That's when his mother began to worry about Cho's odd behavior. He was quiet and withdrawn.
Every time I called and asked how he was, she would say she was worried about him. She said she couldn't die with him. She didn't know what to do. Cho's father and grandfather worried about that. Who would have known he would cause such trouble? The idiot.
Cho's sister acknowledges her brother struggled to fit in.
He was just known as that kid that didn't speak. He never spoke. And that's how everyone remembered him.
Cho's parents left South Korea in hopes of a better life. They worked as dry cleaners, his sister for a State Department contractor. They had hope for Cho too. But now, living in seclusion, buried in grief, Cho's family members have become his victims too. This is someone that I grew up with and loved. Now I feel like I didn't know this person. There is much justified anger and disbelief at what my brother did, and a lot of questions are left unanswered. Questions whose answers may never come. Randy Kay, CNN, New York.